Alright, hello everyone. Welcome back to another stream. So, Ask the Next, Jolton Trainer, Scowleasy, Aaron Vice, Vacuous Zealot, nice to see all of you again. Yesterday, I kind of had to abruptly end the stream because my dog was actually having a seizure, and this is the second time it's happened. It happened one other time a couple weeks ago, but it wasn't clear if it was like a seizure or if he just kind of like hit his head by like falling out of bed because it happened at night the last time too. But this time, because I was still up and streaming, I was able to see what had happened, and he was having a seizure, and got him to the vet today, and we need lab work to come back, but the preliminary guesses are that it could be epilepsy, which is a surprisingly common thing for dogs apparently. And it was just, you know, a bit of an ordeal. The dog is fine. Like right after the seizure happened, it took him a couple minutes to like kind of get back to his feet, and then, he was nuzzling my neck and stuff, so he was okay. The first time it happened, he started like digging after the seizure, and digging is something that he does when he's like a little bit frustrated, when he wants a certain kind of attention that he's not getting. So I wasn't super worried like the first time it happened, but I kept an eye on him in case something else happened. But this was the second time it's happened in like the last month, and he's only like 2.5, which is he's a young guy, so it was definitely a surprise. So we want to get down to the bottom of what's going on and hope my little guy is all right. So, Uncle Survivor, welcome on in. Scally's replaying DS3 and getting mad at the Deep. It brings essentially nothing to the story, and if it was just the Abyss, the lore would have been tighter. I don't I don't agree with that, because there is some good stuff with the Deep, with like the stillness, and I think the Deep always existed, even in like Dark Souls 2 and 3. They just gave it another name in DS3 to I don't know, just go with things. And I'm kind of more upset about the Profaned Flame than the Deep, to be honest. Hey, Aaron Vice, thank you so much for the 10. Some souls for the Great Grey Wolf. May he be restored. Yeah, I guess I may as well like share a picture of him with you guys on stream. Uh, let's see my good fall picture. So this is a cute picture I took of him in the fall with the leaves on the ground. So he's my little guy, and he wasn't doing so hot, but I mean he's okay for the most part. He's running around being a little bit rambunctious. Actually, today he was a little bit more sleepy than normal, which is a little bit of a downer, but it was raining a lot, and he's kind of like solar powered. So yeah. And once again, thank you so much for the 10. I appreciate that. You see the deepest decrepit abyss. The Profane Flame and the Berserk referencing Hypogean capital was such a letdown. You felt that the Deep was underused in the story. Also, didn't Aldrich want to bring an Age of the Deep Water, or was that just a mistranslation? No, so as far as the translation goes, I'm pretty confident that that stuff was localized properly. I don't remember there being any big differences that were noteworthy. And I mean, I've looked at like the stuff relating to darkness and the deep a ton, so I feel like I'd remember. We already have the abyss. How much do you really gain by introducing something so similar and not expanded upon it enough? So that's a good question, and my reconciliation for that idea would be, because of the prolonged linking of the Age of Fire, the universe is starting to have a like more and more of a violent reaction to it, perhaps. And so that's where like the deep is starting to become stagnant itself, and from the stagnation and everything sinking down to the bottom and the cycle not being able to complete itself, it like makes things worse. Aldrich is the worst boss fight in that game. Your love for Belka comes from Vow of Silence in that fight. I never thought about using Vow of Silence. That would, if that works, yeah, that'd be kind of ridiculous, because that's pretty much all he does. I personally dislike maybe the Crystal Sage fight the most because it seems like the worst or maybe the most gimmicky. I mean, Volnir's fight is also pretty bad, sort of. Yeah, it's I don't know. DS3 has some like real high moments and some kind of meh moments. It turns off his fight entirely. Oh man, I'll need to remember that for like the next time I play. I never really played a Magic playthrough for DS3. All right, so last night we got like halfway through Moxie Watts' video about being bamboozled by Gransax when the unfortunate event occurred. So we're going to finish off this video at the beginning of today's stream. So there's probably like, 8 or 10 minutes left. And then after that, I thought we could do an Empyrean deep dive with a human, just a car, as she pronounces it, or he, I don't remember. And then after that, we will go into Who is the Snow Witch by Kite Tales. And we watched a couple videos by her. I believe hers were about the fairies and stuff. And then I thought we could switch some gears a little bit by looking at a video by 8-Bit Music Theory titled Why Does Dark Souls Sound Like Dark Souls? So I'm very curious about this. I'm a pretty big nerd as far as like video game music goes, or just kind of like music in general. So it's kind of right up my alley. And then if we still have time after that, I figured we could finish off with The Fate of the Forlorn by The Honored Madman. So those are the videos on schedule for tonight. Hope you guys are strapped in and ready for some of that heavy speculation as we dive on into this first video. So I'm also gonna like back it up a couple minutes so that way Moxie can get like back into the flow of her thoughts. Okay. Yeah, where would be a good spot? Okay, I think this would be a good spot.
Jillion volts of powerful primordial electricity.
And of course, me double speeding is notable. You say Volnir is gimmicky, but it fits the lore. It does. Well, I don't know. Like, I think like going into his skull and not going like into a real abyss, but like a kind of fake abyss. Excuse me. That's also kind of annoying. Yeah, I've got that cold as well, so it's like one thing after another. So if I suddenly like mute myself, it's probably because I'm like coughing a little bit or something like that. Uncle Survivor says, talking about stuff like the profane flame of the deep, particularly its lack of clarity, makes you wonder if those things could be explored properly in comics or books. So, I mean, theoretically they could, but I wouldn't really ever trust anything not released by FromSoft. Because if you look at, like, the Bloodborne comics, they're more or less just officially endorsed fan canon, and they don't really match up with the game super well. Crystal Sage 1 and 2 are just speed ups. You don't even like those. Yeah, so Crystal Sage 2 isn't even a real boss. You're not my real boss. You can't tell me what to do. Alright, going back into Moxie Watts' video now.
Electricity into the roots of the tree. For this, I turned to none other than my husband, Charlie, who was a naval electrician.
So she asks what would happen if lightning had hit the Erd tree, and she refers to her husband for more of an inside scoop on the electric conductivity type questions.
So, Charlie, what happens when a large amount of electricity goes through a golden pole and is plunged into the ground?
Interesting line of questioning. Gold is an excellent conductor of electricity, and wood is not. Gold is one of nature's best conductors, and can keep cool under massive electrical loads. Wood conducts electricity in a more catastrophic manner. Alright, yeah, let's keep going. Alright. After the initial damage is dealt by Gransax's ancient spear, several things happen. The path of least resistance is found through the tree. A flash forms. 300 million volts begins to float from the trunk, through the roots, and into the earth. Poor conductors like lignin fibers, tree stuff, heat up, combust, and vaporize. If matter cannot evacuate fast enough, an explosion ensues. In less than a second, the transfer ceases. light fades, and superheated air collapses upon itself in a massive thunderclap. A massive electrical surge like this could create a large incinerated cavern, like the one we enter within the Erd Tree. It's capable of far greater destruction. Any organic compounds are immediately incinerated in a blaze of 50,000 degrees American, leaving a massive chamber, charred and sterile. Charred and sterile. Could anything survive? Ooh.
All right. So, this explanation could lend to why the tree is hollow and split. In addition, it could have
And Scowleezy made the same joke as he did last night. Insert joke about lignin here. Lignin D's bolts.
laid the ground for Deathroot to take hold. So before we get to all the fun stuff, we have to start with the most boring and middle of the road explanations.
And so just to repeat some of the thoughts that I had about this last night would be, in some ways, I do think the Erd Tree being struck by lightning and having the things within the tree, like, getting essentially grounded through the ground, but, you know, articulated better, would make a lot of sense, because that could potentially explain why Altus Plateau in particular is so suffused with gold, because maybe it came from the actual Erd Tree, but there's always the possibility that the reason things are more gold up there is because it's like where the gold gets funneled towards from like the rest of the world, but we don't really know. And then the other point that I was contentious about last night has to deal with the metaphysical nature of gold in Elden Ring not being a one-to-one parallel to gold as we seem to know it in real life. I kind of phrased that like the wrong way. It's more like the gold we seem to know in Elden Ring. Like we kind of know what gold is in real life, you know, but not so much in Elden Ring, because lightning is gold in Elden Ring. And so would gold within the Erd Tree be susceptible and react just the same way to like the Elden Ring lightning? Maybe not. Maybe lightning in Elden Ring is different from like the electricity in real life. Yeah, I don't want to get into the whole like magnetism theories, because like that gets really beyond my scope of knowledge. But I guess there is like some form of magnetism allegedly in Elden Ring, because like you kind of get like magnetism, like magnetic poles kind of shown in the gravity seals. I don't know. Anyway, definitely moving beyond my wheelhouse there. And Aaron Weiss brings up the same question. Is Elden Ring lightning the same as Terran lightning? It's kind of a funny way to say that. You don't remember incinerating sorcerers with lightning spear? Like, does it abide by the laws of physics? Yeah, that's something that I wonder as well, because the Gravelstone seal does make it clear that like lightning is gold, or gold and lightning are similar to some degree. So maybe the Erd Tree wouldn't just explode by a random bolt of lightning, which kind of seems likely, because I can only imagine just, you know, having one unfortunate really rainy day in Elaine Dell just kind of just bringing the Age of Abundance to an abrupt end. Alright, going back to the video now.
So let's talk motivation, starting with the most generic, and then we go to the most outrageous and crackpot. So, alright, Gransax could have crash landed in the Leyndell by accident. And this is just funny to think about. Like, Gransax accidentally started a war because he's clumsy. This point seems easily refuted because he stares up at the Erd Tree, kind of conveying this feeling like, look what I did. There's nothing you can do about it. It's possible it's just an accident, but it could have been a different kind of fumble. Perhaps he accidentally went too far back in time to kill Godwin, thus slamming into the capital and accidentally starting war. He could have also hated the Erd Tree and wanted to destroy it from within. The desire for Gransax to attack the capital in this way, perhaps, was the way in which the tyrant Marika was making decisions. And perhaps they wanted to cause mortal harm to the Erd Tree because of what it stood for. It does seem like there was a hierarchy that the humans were blatantly ignoring. the hierarchy being dragons, then beastmen, then humans. Alternatively, there could have been something weird happening with the Newman where they summoned down the meteor showers and broke off Fair Missoula. This would make the dragons very angry, especially if Fair Missoula was once located where the capital was.
I liked the layering of the images there with like falling rain of stars and the moon and the dragons. Pretty nice.
Very angry, especially if Fair Missoula was once located where the capital was. And it could have been the greater will at play, paving the way for Deathroot to take hold. There could be more.
And so, like, whether Fair Missoula was where Lindell is a contentious thing. And, like, I'm not saying that in such a way to, like, disagree with Moxie as much as it is just, like, one of those things where there are hints kind of left behind in the game world, like the Chloranthy style design that I brought up at, like, towards the end of last stream, that is present in both Lindell and Fair Missoula, and also Archdragon Peak and the Consumed King's Garden. But yeah, there's a lot of strangeness surrounding that time of the game's history that I really wish we knew more about. You also get that dexterity scales lightning on a weapon, but what is it about dragons being dexterous? Like, the spear has some really high dex requirements. Well, the dragons, they've got thumbs, so they, you know, they're pretty dexterous. Newmans are just America's offspring? Potentially, yes. And, I mean, that could just be like a square and rectangle thing. Like, is America a Newman? I mean, she's said to be a Newman, but is she, like, are all the Newman of America stock? I mean, yes, but no. It'd be like saying, trying to think. Okay. So, like, Queen Elizabeth was English, but not all English people were related to Queen Elizabeth, if that makes sense. You get he's an ancient dragon and doesn't relate to the arcane, but wouldn't a faith requirement make more sense? No, because you got to have the thumbs and a certain amount of dexterity to be able to wield and throw the spear. You got to throw the spear, and throwing is a dex thing. Maybe dex is less tactile flexibility and more rolling with the punches, going with the flow. Uncle Iroh type mental metaphysical dexterity. Big head dex required to direct lightning. Nah, you just throw it. That's all it is. All right.
But these were the best I could come up with. Let me know what's on your mind downstairs in the comments. Tarnished. Before we get to my own crackpot theory.
I was just thinking, like, how awkward so many YouTube videos would be if, like, they ever changed the layout so that the comments weren't on the bottom of the, like, page anymore. It would just be really weird. Also, some other strange thing that I noticed literally today, while I was eating and watching a video, when they said like and subscribe, or be sure to like and subscribe, this freaking thing glowed. It blew my mind. Wait, I can show you guys. Let me do it this way. ADD moment. Hey everyone. When do I say like and subscribe? Shops shouldn't have a limited stock of inventory for Eyes of Vengeance or Charred Fingers. I do think they need to put them into making more improvements. I'll just be huffing on the hope, streaming my reaction to other. Resume critiquing and analyzing lore videos for Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and hopefully with enough traction, Hexworks will see it and it will help push them and improved. Feel free to share them in the comments. Okay, here we go. Please like and share the video if you glows. Hopefully with enough traction, Hexworks will see it. I didn't put anything there to make that happen. So they're listening to my voice or like reading the closed captions and like doing that themselves. That it just blew my mind. Anyway, now you guys know and you can look for it yourselves. Also rate 5 stars, yeah. Yeah, okay, yeah, that happened once in the past since the titles used to be the 5 stars, yeah. I preferred the star rating. I also hate that like Netflix changed to thumbs up and thumbs down because like there's a lot of things that I would just have on that I didn't necessarily mind, but it's not something that I loved. So it's not something that I would like give like a as much of a thumbs up as like I would like a 5-star thing. So anyway, I just kind of stopped using the ratings because were garbage. I mean, I've canceled Netflix since then, but anyway, really off topic now. Yeah, the built-in responses. I really wish we still had that. That would have been really nice for the streams. I mean, we have mentions now, but they're really awkward. I kind of found out about them by accident by looking at like my creator page and saw like there was this weird mentions tab. And when I looked at it, I had like mentions from months ago that I didn't know about. And yeah. So anyway, okay, going back to Maxi Watts, crackpot theory.
Void Tower, 5497. We know the dragons can shapeshift into human form, so that adds an element of espionage to the war. In the first battle in Lindell, most of the dragons were probably flying down from Fair Missoula over the walls, but some of them could have been posing as human citizens in the city, waiting to strike. This could have been a little bit more difficult for Godwin to manage, who in his army was an ally or enemy until he befriended Fortasax.
That's a pretty cool idea that the dragons could have been infiltrating as humans for quite a while. That would make like a lot of sense from like a tactical standpoint, but in some ways I would almost assume that would be against the nature of dragons, with the exception of like a doula who can like use their brains, just because they seem more quote unquote primal in nature.
I really like this idea of espionage, and like I could have explored that a little bit more deeply, I think, but you know, I feel like that would have definitely come after the Ancient Dragons. No? I don't know. Then from Gotten 339. Honestly, it felt like too much of a vague rehash of Dark Souls lore to me, where I felt the presence of dragons within the lore and the world was explored in a most interesting way, natural way, with the dragon's rule over humanity being a huge point in the lore. I haven't played any of the other Dark Souls games, but it's interesting to know that down the road, whenever I do play Dark Souls, that it'll be more clear. From Asius. My biggest question is, when was the war? There was enough time for a cult to emerge that worships the dragon, but did that happen before or after Gransax turned himself into a tourist attraction?
So this is really hard to read, especially on like the really bright backgrounds. I would have increased the opacity.
There was a whole war. What were they doing with the dragon's corpses before? There's a frozen dragon corpse in a cave in the mountaintops, but I think it's actually a modern dragon, not an ancient dragon. I don't know, I haven't checked recently. Also, dragons very clearly have some sort of connection to the storm and birds. Nefeli is almost definitely a part of Godfrey's bloodline, but I also think that implies she of Marika's bloodline. So maybe Vike wasn't the only one favored by the dragons. Also, whatever foe Godfrey faced at Stormvale was the last one before his eyes lost the grace of gold. So first off, I didn't even know about this cave. It doesn't have arms, so wyvern, right? It has feathers. Like,
yeah, all of the ancient dragons have feathers and also hair. They're really strange. So I've wondered whether or not the wyverns could be something like crows that ate dead dragons and kind of inadvertently committed a bit of a dragon communion and transformed, and or like the dogs. I don't know, the non-ancient dragons are very strange. Errant Vice says the human shapeshifting part has been taken interesting places by the fan base, and yeah, it's about Godwin and Fortasax. Uh-oh. Hey, Henrik, Kali, welcome into the stream. Yeah, okay.
feathers, which kind of really supports what you were saying. And I had to think about it for 24 straight hours. Yeah, I'm gonna need to keep thinking about it. But really, really crackpot good cooking right there.
So, I don't know if she's going to go back into more potential motivations for the war between the dragons and, Langdell and whatnot. I almost always say giants instead of dragons for whatever reason. And I've wondered whether or not the Crucible in the form of the Erd Tree was taking the most vital aspects of life away from the dragons, who had like the most concentrated form of life, supposedly, and were kind of funneling it to everything, and that's where you get all life, quote unquote, blending together. And so something could have been taken away from the dragons, and then from those dragons you start getting more draconic style features on other creatures. So the omens start growing horns, kind of like the scales on the like the backs of the modern dragons and whatnot, or the ancient dragons, a little bit, but not really. And then Misbegotten have vestigial wings and tails and everything, but they're just kind of like a real mishmash of everything. So I do wish there was more of a rationale to understand why omens are the way that they are versus why Misbegotten are the way they are. Because if they are both from a like a byproduct of a time where life was blended together, why are they so distinct? I mean, that isn't necessarily like to say that the ideas are completely incompatible, because one could have affected humans one way, and then others could have affected demi-humans another way. It's really unclear exactly how all that works. 110 from PayPal. Welcome into the stream. The Dung Eaters invaded my chat. Oh no. Well, fortunately, the sanctity of the round table hold protects us. Feathers on dragons, so like the Misbegotten Crucible connection? Maybe, unironically. The only issue with that idea specifically is the existence or supposed existence of the ice dragons on the mountaintops being there alongside the fire giants. So if the ice dragons are there along with the fire giants, this should happen presumably before the age of the Erd Tree. But, and you know, this is one of the things where I don't really like to argue it because it seems needlessly, bro, why does that get stuck there? It's so annoying. It seems needlessly pedantic, and it just comes across like the ravings of a crazy person. But for what it's worth, in Borealis' Mist, the ice dragons were once lords of the mountaintops long ago, until they were defeated by the fire giants and chased from the peak. The Japanese here at the very end has our favorite little characters, Toyu, which means it is said. So this story is hearsay in Japanese, but not in English. So presumably, why? Oh my god, it's so obnoxious. It's presumably more open-ended, but yeah, I don't know. Like, part of me would like the modern dragons to be a post-Erd Tree development, but if they're not, I mean, oh well, I'll just have to, rationalize it some other way. You were thinking the Crucible with the feathers too? Yeah. How did the dragons get the ass kicked by the fire giants? Aren't they all super resistant to fire? So that's like one other thing to consider. It is a hearsay description, and we don't exactly know how that works. Because like the whole relationship between the fire giants and the dragons it's just completely unexplored, except for this one description. So, yeah, everything will really just have to hinge on speculation at this point. We are figuring out Dark Souls lore, but for Elden Ring. You love it? Yeah, it's kind of what we're all here for. Hey, howdy.
Regardless of motive, here's what I think happened. The fun part of the theory. Pretend this is Gransax. He would begin his charge in the later part of the war. Maybe they cannot control what happens when they charge this attack. What if Gransax began charging up further into the Ancient Dragon War, then went back in time through the storm beyond time, the Ancient Dragon and somber Ancient Dragon smithing stones, the scale of the Ancient Dragon Lord, hidden treasure of Fair Missoula, strengthens armaments to +10. Nice. The Ancient Dragon Lord's seat is said to lie beyond time. This stone lightly twists time, allowing the creation of a weapon capable of slaying a god. This is in relation to Placidus X, of course. But it's gotta make you wonder, is this what makes the ancient dragons so superior? He dips out of the cloud and slams into the Erd tree, frying the roots and splitting the bark of the tree, hollowing out the tree. Place this event wherever you please on the timeline, but if you ask me, it lines up way too perfectly with the events surrounding the end of the Age of Plenty. This would explain why the tree stopped producing sap. The seals between the Age of Plenty and the shackles that bound the Omen brothers look like a fried tree. I mean, just like visually, look at it. Kinda looks zapped. So, to clarify, he goes into said cloud. Gransax comes out of the cloud, plunges his bolt into the roots. The strike on Lindell split the Erd tree into what is seen today, a hollow shell of a tree. Now, this certainly was a crackpot idea, but it's incredibly entertaining to think about. I mean, come on, admit it. Like, come on.
Sure, it's entertaining, but there are other parts of the text which makes me doubt that, more specifically in that the Age of Abundance seemed to come more to a gradual end, because the way that America addresses her comrades into searching the depths of the Golden Order seems like they were in a time of more peace or stability or tranquility than I think this story allows for. And obviously the whole like timeline of when that quote was, like when it took place, is a bit contentious and arguable, but I don't think her comrades would have hesitated so much to follow America down a different path. If their tree got blown up, I think they would have been like a scrambling a bit more, and there would have been like more of a mention in it. But I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that the lack of a mention of something, how do I phrase that? Like, doesn't, like, not mentioning something doesn't mean it didn't happen in a Miyazaki FromSoft style game, e.g. The Ringed City and Filianor and all that stuff. So, how do you just rewatched Mad Max Fury Road? Yeah, I kind of want to rewatch it myself, especially after like seeing the Furiosa trailers and stuff. Not that like I'm super interested in the Furiosa thing. Like I'm a little bit on the fence. But anyway, yeah. Dr. N said, you'll always be of the stance that there's no such thing as hearsay in the text unless future text confirms hearsay with another statement. I understand where you're coming from with that, and yeah, so at least with Elden Ring, there is some more explicit contradictions at times between the hearsay, and if you're curious as to why I am a bit more skeptical about hearsay in general, give me one moment here. Trying to pull up a Miro board real quick. I'm all signed out and crap, so it's going to take me a minute. Okay. All right, so this is my Miro board about inconsistencies, contradictions, and hearsay in FromSoft games. And, well, there isn't necessarily like a ton of like hearsay in some of the games. Like there are decent spots where like there are like straight up contradictions at times, or ways that like FromSoft can sort of betray player expectations. So like some of this stuff isn't really like super I don't want to say like super impactful or like super shocking or anything like that. But anyway, where's a good one with the hearsay? Oh yeah, so obviously the one that I always point to is that for the astrologer set, it says that they read the fate in the night stars and are said to be the heirs of the glintstone sorcerers, but alas, the night sky no longer cradles fate. And then in the preceptor set, it says Glintstone sorcerers are the descendants of astrologers, a fact that the Carians remain aware of, even if their fate has long been severed from the stars. So some people try to interpret this as some glintstone sorcerers are astrologers, or like vice versa. I don't really care. But anyway, I think it's, in my mind, it's pretty clear that there is a current belief in the lands between that the glintstone sorcerers are kind of like their own thing, and the astrologers are derivative of the glintstone sorcerers. But I believe this to be a mistaken belief, and this is a tale that is said of astrologers. And so while these kind of contradict each other, that's just like one of the examples of hearsay not fully panning out. And then, yeah. So anyway, I did do a stream of this a couple months back. It is archived on the live section of my channel if you're more interested in like a detailed breakdown of like each little thing here. And I do have like the thing about like Placidus Axe not being an Elden Lord here. So that's another case of like hearsay coming into direct conflict with text that is not hearsay. So there are a couple times about that. And so because of the few instances where hearsay does run into issues with the third person omniscient text, that does cause me to be a little bit more skeptical about other times the text is written as hearsay. And of course, not every instance of hearsay is really meant to be disbelieved implicitly or anything like that. But I think for the most part, it's like a rhetorical device in Japanese, just to give the authors a bit of wiggle room and to soften some statements. So it really does come down to individual interpretation about like what the intended authority of certain statements are. But anyway, a little off topic there. I take serious notes. Yeah, that one took a couple days to make. Thanks, Howdy. It better be a good one. Henrik asks, if I was going to make my own timeline of Elden Ring, what would it be? And given the George R.R. Martin part of Elden Ring and the themes of feudalism, what do I think the writing is trying to say about the world? So, for the first part of your question, are you asking whether or not if I was able to arrange events as I would like it, or just my current interpretation of it? Because I do have another mirror board where I do cover the timeline of Elden Ring. Sort of. And yeah. So I also have that backed up on the live section of my channel, and this isn't exactly like to scale or to date, and there are like, you know, some very contentious claims on here. But basically the way that I see it is you have a prehistory that exists before like the age of the Erd tree, and during this time you have the ancient dragons and like the Ul and Erd dynasties. And then after that time you have like the war against the fire giants, and then that ushers in the age of the Erd tree, which in my estimation is the age of the crucible, which is synonymous with the age of abundance. And then after the age of abundance, you have Radagon becoming Elden Lord, and that is when I believe Destined Death got sealed and the creation of the Golden Order happened in conjunction with Golden Order fundamentalism. I don't think they're really meant to be different, but that's just my take on events. And the Golden Order's reign existed up until the point of like the Night of the Black Knives, and then you have the Shattering kind of changing everything. And then down here specifically, I have like another kind of extended timeline where I'm more or less covering the beginnings of the Crucible to the Golden Order, essentially, in a lot more detail. So yeah, if you want that, I do have like the direct, I guess I could link the things directly. Yeah, so let me pull up the other mirror board that I showed as well. So these are like the timeline ones. They're probably not going to make the most sense on their own, so I do have the streams. Although the most annoying thing about this is I was like hyping up this, like discussing like making one of these parts clear, and then I like jumped ahead and forgot to go back and actually make a very important thing clear. So rip everybody's what's the word? Understanding of some of the points that I was trying to make. Let me pull up the other Miro board real quick so I can link it in the chat because these are both public. All right, and so this one's for the inconsistencies. All right. Not mentioning it doesn't equal it didn't happen, and there's a lot of room for giants to have allies, different magics, etc., technology, etc., etc., in relation to dunking on dragons via hearsay. So yeah, as far as like the fire giant actually fighting the dragons, I mean, I don't totally disbelieve it. I just would prefer the ice dragons to have been a byproduct of something happening to the ancient dragons that coincides with the age of the Erd Tree, and that would make more sense to me if ice dragons were created after the war against the giants. So with that one description being hearsay, it does leave a little bit of wiggle room to allow for that kind of interpretation. So that's kind of where I'm at in my headcanon there. Dr. Ann also takes issues with how you've seen FromSoft crop text out and rearrange stuff. So in that specific example, you agree about it being a direct contradiction though? Okay. Do I like Golden Order Totality or Praise the Sun better? I think Golden Order Totality. Because I feel like I could do Golden Order Totality off the stern of a ship versus Praise the Sun. I'm on top of the world. Dark Souls and Elden Ring say that all things will die, and trying to hold on to everything will corrupt those things. They will wither and become lesser. It's better to sometimes let things fade. Yeah, I agree. So Lair left the chat. Oh yeah, so Henrik had asked, what else? What do I think the writing is trying to say about the world of Elden Ring and all that? Yeah, kind of just what Vacuous Zealot said there as well. Typically, the way that I view all of the like recent FromSoft games is that the world is what you make of it, and the only people who have the authority to shape the world are the ones who take that authority for themselves, which is a bit of a, kind of a brutalist perspective, but it's, I mean, can't be wrong. Anyway, what's the term? Like might makes right, for better or worse, kind of. Feels bad, man. Okay, let's go ahead and finish off the video.
If you like Elden Ring or other gaming lore and speculation, consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much to my channel members. This channel wouldn't be possible without your support. I also have a Patreon if you'd like to help support the channel. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
Hey. Yeah, so that was an enjoyable video. I'm going to go ahead and like it. And if you want to, guys, give Moxie a like and a sub as well, feel free to do so. All right, the link is in the chat. Authority trying to hang on to power? Sounds unrealistic. I know, right, Stella? Welcome back to the stream. Okay, so that was a good video by Moxie. Now we're going to transition into Empyreans Deep Dive Elden Ring Lore and Theory by A Human Just a Car. Music.
Empyreans are amongst the most interesting beings in the lands between. But what separates an Empyrean from all the other demigods? And why are they the ones chosen to bear this title? Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I am A Human Justicar, and today we will be discussing every detail and secret about the Empyreans. Before we dive into it, if you are not already subscribed to my channel, you should do so by clicking the subscribe button down below. I post new videos and shorts all the time, so be sure to click the notification bell as well so you don't miss out on those. There will be major spoilers ahead, so please continue at your own risk. I'll be tackling...
Alright guys, spoiler warning. Alright, Uncle Survivor says, on the topic of brutalism and might makes right in its themes, you think Elden Ring is a bit of a departure? Tyrants exist in Elden Ring, but they're all orbiting Marika's story, which seems to be a leader relinquishing... ... So I don't know about that because, I mean, what is Marika really relinquishing and what does it take for her to relinquish it? It still takes somebody stepping on the corpses of a number of victims to get to where they are in the end. Like, even like the best Elden Lord story is kind of built on the foundations of tyranny in a way. So, but I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. First, you need to crack some eggs to make an omelet, and then once you make an omelet, you can create society by selling the omelets at a surplus profit.
Today's topic into 4 parts, starting with who are the Empyreans? We know of 5 Empyreans to have existed in the lands between, though it's likely there were more. Queen Marika, her children Mikola and Melania, Ranni the Witch, and the Glowmide Queen. The Black Flame Ritual was a
Glowmide. It's been a minute since we've gotten those kind of auto captions.
superior black flame incantation of the Godskin Apostles. The Glowmide Queen led the Apostles, and it is said that she was an Empyrean chosen by the Fingers. The Glowmide Queen unfortunately met her end when Malekith the Black Blade defeated her. The Godslayer's greatsword confirms her demise, sacred sword of the Dusk-Eyed Queen who controlled the Godskin Apostles before her defeat at the hands of Malekith.
Alright, so this is one of the times that I'll be pedantic, not necessarily because I disagree, but because I think it prematurely closes a door that we're not entirely sure should be closed yet, because defeating somebody doesn't necessarily mean that they're dead, especially in a game like Elden Ring where certain things can exist beyond death, perhaps. But of course, yeah, it just becomes a real mess, especially with the identity of the Glowmide Queen being up in the air. Some people believe she is Melina for, many reasons. And let's not go down that route just quite yet. But defeat doesn't necessarily mean death. So, alright. I'll get off my soapbox now.
The remembrance of the Black Blade tells us that Malekith was a shadow-bound beast given to his Empyrean, Marika. And it is actually Ranni the Witch who tells us that she and the Cursed Twins were also considered Empyreans.
I was once an Empyrean, of the demigods. Only I, Mikola, and Melania could claim that title.
This leads me into the second part of this video. What is an Empyrean? In our world, the word Empyrean refers to the heavens or the sky, or a heavenly place where God's will and the souls of humans become one. An Empyrean in the lands between is a little more complicated than that. Ranni the Witch continues this conversation, explaining to us the purpose of an Empyrean.
Each of us was chosen by our own 2 fingers, as a candidate to succeed Queen Marika, to become the new god of the coming age.
So we
Hey Ava, yes, welcome into the stream. My dog is doing okay for now. I'm waiting on lab work to get, a better picture of what's going on, but he might be epileptic. But yes, thank you for the concern. I appreciate that.
We know that not only are Empyreans chosen, but more than one is picked when approaching the end of the current age, with the purpose of becoming the next god for the new age. But only one will become a god, as we see with Queen Marika during the age of the Erdtree. But what about the previous age? Dragon Lord Placidusax's remembrance tells us, the Dragon Lord whose seat lies at the heart of the storm, beyond time, is said to have been Elden Lord in the age before the Erd Tree. Once his god was fled, the Lord continued to await its return. Dragon Lord Placidusax was the Elden Lord to the god of the age before the Erd Tree. We can make the assumption that if the Empyreans are chosen to become the new god, then by default, Dragon Lord Placidusax's god would have been an Empyrean. So a god in the lands between, much like an Empyrean, is not something random, but it is in fact chosen. The Remembrance of the Rock Goddess states that Miquella and Melania are both children of a single god. As such, they are both Empyreans. We know by now that Queen Marika and Radagon are one. Whether or not they always were is highly contested, but there's no question that they are a single god, sharing the same body. This description not only implies that this process happened before the twins were born, but also that this is a requirement of being an Empyrean. It's entirely possible that the English translation is more so responsible for this interpretation rather than the original Japanese description.
I think, hold on, I need to like re-listen to that because I feel like there was like a little bit of a jump there.
Before the twins were born, but also not only implies that this process happened before the twins were born, but also that this is a requirement of being an Empyrean.
Does somebody else understand that like a little bit better, that the two need to be one? Is that what she's saying? Like, I'm not clear what this requirement is right now. Anyway, Uncle Survivor says, but real quick, as for what Marika did to relinquish the tyranny, she tasks Hugh with crafting a god-killing tool and pays the ultimate price for the death stuff. Is contested over Radica has always been the same? Oh yeah, everything's contested, bro. So yeah. Some people believe that Radigan could have been his own man with his own body and own like goals before, and he could have fused with Marika at some point after the fact. You're not sure what she's trying to say either? Okay, thank you. Empyrean could be a clue to set in context how the Golden Order sees themselves and how to approach their order. Maybe, but Empyreans should also predate the Golden Order, potentially with like the Golem Queen being one. Jarhead even has a usurper theory. Yes. And welcome back to the stream, Kimley. She said basically that whether or not Merrick and Radigan were one beings or not is up to interpretation depending on the translation. I don't think she was saying that as much. I mean, I think she was just saying like it's contentious. But hold on, let me rewatch that again.
But there's no question that
I'm going to back up a little bit further just to like, get her full sentence there.
The Remembrance of the Rock Goddess states that Miquella and Melania are both children of a single god. As such, they are both Empyreans. We know by now that Queen Marika and Radagon are one. Whether or not they always were is highly contested, but there's no question that they are a single god, sharing the same body. This description not only implies that this process happened before the twins were born, but also that this is a requirement of being an Empyrean.
Okay, I think I get what she's trying to say, but I might be a little bit off base. That Marika and Radigan are one, but because they're God, they're also an Empyrean. So I think she's like conflating the two, but she might go into like a little bit more detail after this. So this just might not have been articulated as well as she wanted it to be. So this isn't something that I think is just like wrong. I was just like trying to understand her point as best as I could.
It's entirely possible that the English translation...
She was saying being born of a god like Radica is considered a requirement. Yes. And because like Radigan is Marika, it meets that requirement. Yeah, I could potentially see that. But I guess like, is Radigan technically an Empyrean? That's interesting. I mean, he would kind of have to be, because Miquella and Melania fit that bill, allegedly due to their heredity. So yeah, I guess Radigan is kind of an Empyrean, isn't he? Or is he not? No, he probably couldn't be, because he's more than an Empyrean. So, Oh man, this is kind of messing with me. That might make sense why America says he's not yet a god then, because he could have just been an Empyrean who couldn't impose his order. Can Radigan actually be a vessel? So, okay, there's a couple different ways to break down what an Empyrean is. So, I think at a baseline level, we could say that an Empyrean is a candidate to succeed America in becoming a vessel for the Elden Ring, or like the vessel of the Order, or the vision of the Order, depending like a couple factors. But setting those apart, could Radigan have done it? Well, I mean, I guess so, because like when he shapeshifts from America, the Elden Ring is still kind of in his body, isn't it? Yeah, it's kind of weird. I know, 99 plus 1. Man, it's an insight moment right here. It feels like we got that insight, but just our counter couldn't go any higher.
Is more so responsible for this interpretation rather than the original Japanese description. Regardless, it's still an interesting piece of evidence, and if true, then it would have wild implications on the lore. An Empyrean needing to be born of a single god makes sense for Melania and Mikola, but that would mean Rani was also born of a single god, which throws her
I guess I'll let her finish her statement, but this is something I strongly disagree with. But anyway.
parentage into question. And seeing as how all three are siblings, this could suggest that Queen Marika and the Glomite Queen were also related, perhaps even sisters, born from the same single god. This would keep...
Alright, so this is an idea that I'm kind of familiar with because of like Titan on the Discord. He's a user. And the general idea is that an Empyrean has to be born of a single god, and that Rani isn't the biological child of Renala. And there's a couple of different ways you can break it down, but anyway, I would disagree with the idea that an Empyrean has to be born of a single person god, or like born of a god directly, essentially, because we are told by Rani that Empyreans are also chosen by fingers. And if you want to go down this route, I guess it also brings into question the Glomide Queen's role and everything. And of course, you could like spin it as Melina still and all that stuff. And there's still like all the fun to be had with those types of theories. But generally speaking, I think there are two given ways one can become an Empyrean. One is that you're chosen by the fingers, which you've already covered. The second is that you are an Empyrean by virtue of quote unquote being a god person, because let's pull up. I mean, this is kind of a made up word in Japanese, I think. Let me look for it. Shinjin. Shinjin. Oh, okay. So it's a made up word for all intents and purposes, but it's like a recontextualization of it, like another word that exists. So this is the word for Empyrean as far as like the Japanese goes. This is the first character, god. The second character is the one for person. So you could consider it to be something like divine being. And so with Marika literally being a god and Radigan being Marika, there's only like, of the gene pool that Mikola and Melania are able to inherit, it is 100% god person gene pool. So by the virtue of them being 100% god, they are themselves god people. So that could be why they are Empyreans, because of like a weird loophole. But most others are most likely chosen by the two fingers. So I think Mikola and Melania are supposed to be this weird exception, and they're cursed at birth. And as far as we know, they don't have Shadowhound beasts either. Whereas Marika has a Shadowhound beast and Rani has a Shadowhound beast, potentially given to them by their respective two fingers. And Salinas, welcome into the stream. She doesn't know what an Empyrean is. It's weird she thinks this. The game calls them a vessel, not a godborn. She's getting games mixed up or something. No, not necessarily. I think it's just an unfortunate misconception of what an Empyrean means in one instance and trying to apply that to all instances. So I'm trying to think of like another parallel without using like gibberish words. So okay. So dogs, wolves, and coyotes are all canines, I guess. I mean, this might be factually inaccurate, but I'm pretty confident they're all canines to some degree. So, with dogs coming from wolves, that means coyotes come from wolves too. That's kind of like the logic that I think is inherent at this, but that's not true in the case of the coyotes. Like dogs do come from wolves. I mean, it's probably a lot more complicated than that, but coyotes are like cousins to them, but they're all still canines. So, that's just kind of like the way that I think we can compare this in a way that like makes sense. But anyway, um, Uncle Survivor says, aren't Empyreans literally just someone pre-selected by the Elden Ring and Elden Beast to be roped in as a consort? So I would say yes, with an asterisk of the with like regarding the exception of Mikola and Melania, existing under a contractual loophole of being born of a single person god, and so they like inherited their Empyrean nature. Scowley says, you think she's got it a little backwards? Empyreans are simply the candidates for being the next god, and because Mickey and Melly were born of the current god, they naturally qualify as candidates. Yes. So you're saying the same thing I am. Uncle Survivor says, Empyrean sounds more like Golden Order political propaganda to separate those innately worthy of from never even considered to be fit for godlyhood or vesselhood. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, the existence of the two fingers is strange because they're broken, but if they had more agency, I wonder how things would be different. Hey Bella, welcome into the stream. Yes, my dog is doing all right. I'm kind of waiting on the lab work to come back to get a better, more accurate picture of what's going on. But for now, we're thinking he might have epilepsy, unfortunately. You recall when Eiji said Rani is following the dark path of the Empyrean? Isn't this curious? It implies Empyreans embody negative characteristics, right? Let me double check the dark path of an Empyrean. I don't remember if there's anything that, like, differed in it. Huh. Dark path? Yeah. I'm not entirely sure why they call it the dark path. But it is consistent between languages. And Ronnie says it herself. She calls it like the dark path, like a bunch right here. I should probably. All right, yeah. Yep. And so, what was the rest of that question? Let me look at it again. It implies Empyreans embody negative characteristics. Not necessarily negative. So I think it could be taken metaphorically that like dark means an untreaded path, like one that isn't illuminated. So she has to like figure it out for herself. That would be kind of the way that would make sense to me, just because in Ronnie's ending dialogue with as obtuse as it is, she's saying her 1,000 year, aka age long voyage is something that's not been done before, and so will you accompany her even though you guys kind of both don't know what really lies ahead. It's kind of like the Aldia ending in Dark Souls 2 in a certain sense. Sounds like EG is using the regular definition of Empyrean here as a synonym for cosmic, but you'd have to check the original translation. Makes it sound like it's a major transgression, but against what? I need a little bit more context. What exactly is the major transgression? Could the confusion with Empyreans be from translation issues and people making this topic unintentionally more complicated than it probably is? Not necessarily. It's just one of those things where, like, even Japanese people can get different ideas about this because it's so vague. And I mean, even if we pretended like the Japanese version of the game didn't exist for a moment, there's if you give somebody like the same passage, you'll have people disagreeing over what it can be interpreted as. Like, that's what we do all day. So obviously, with what I do, I have the benefit of being able to provide us a little bit more context to help clarify things, but I also try to be very clear about what I think can be interpreted in multiple ways when I encounter issues with the Japanese as well. All right, so I think we've hashed that out for now.
Their bloodlines pure, which is an idea we know George R.R. Martin loves to toy with. Enya even mentions the purity of Queen Marika's bloodline when speaking about the demigods, specifically Godric the Grafted. Godric the Grafted was but a distant relation, the runt of the litter, his divine blood sorely diluted. On the opposite end of that spectrum, we see someone like General Radahn, who is a great example of a demigod versus an Empyrean and what makes them so different from each other. General Radahn mastered gravitational abilities that allowed him to control the star's movements, but Malenia's ultimate strength was not her skill with the sword, but it was the rot inside of her. It was something she was simply born with. While each of the demigods have great
Maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's Scarlet Rot.
strength and abilities that separate them from ordinary champions, the Empyrean's pure blood separates them from the other demigods. While we may never know for sure if being born of a single god is what truly makes one an Empyrean, unless the DLC gives us more clues, it's still entirely possible, so I don't want to count it out. Let's switch our focus back onto Queen Marika, as she is the Empyrean who became a god in the current age. Queen Marika is of the Numen race, and the Numen in the character creation are described as long-lived but seldom born. At some point, she was chosen as an Empyrean, one of the possible candidates to replace Dragon Lord Placidusax's god. She would have then received Malekith, her shadow, before rising at last to godhood and ushering in the age of the Erd Tree.
All right, so you guys want some of those hashtag deep lore cuts? It's possible Marika could have also been Placidusax's god. Don't at me.
Enya describes her as the vessel of the Elden Ring, carrier of its vision, a god in truth. We can see during the cutscene inside the Erd Tree that the Elden Ring is indeed inside of Radagon, their body serving as its vessel. What makes this strange is when you realize the Elden Ring is actually the Elden Beast itself, as the Elden Stars tell us. The Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring. Now, a viewer asked a really good question on one of my most recent YouTube shorts, and that was, why did Ranni have to kill her flesh? Well, a vessel and a vassal are two very different things, and the words are not used in the game interchangeably. A vassal is a person or thing that is subordinate to or controlled by another. The two fingers, for instance, are described as a vassal of the Greater Will. Queen Marika, on the other hand, is not called a vassal. Enya calls her the vessel of the Elden Ring. A vessel is a hollow container that holds something. The point I am trying to emphasize here is that Queen Marika's body is literally the vessel for the Elden Ring.
It feels kind of surreal to have somebody be pedantic over the English in a way that I'm similarly pedantic over the Japanese. But this one's just kind of funny to me. I don't know why.
AKA the Elden Beast. It exists inside of her very being. Her body was picked for this very purpose, and it's why she and Radagon are broken when we enter the Erd Tree. When Queen Marika shattered the Elden Ring, she actually shattered her own body. How can one destroy something that lives inside of them without first destroying themselves? It's incredibly eerie the more you think about it.
And real talk here, and I know it's really dissatisfying to some people, and to a certain part of myself it is also dissatisfying, but there is a non-zero chance that Marika literally did shatter part of herself away from Radagon, and that thing could exist potentially in the form of Melina, because Melina could be the quote-unquote daughter of Marika and that she's born from her metaphysically and not literally. So she could be an aspect of Marika, and that could help explain why she inherited Marika's will to, like, burn down the Erd Tree and, like, change the age and the order when none of the other demigod children do, or at least not quite to the same extent that Melina does. So there's, like, a lot of weird stuff going on with Marika and Melina specifically, and I know it gets brought up from time to time that in the internal files, excuse me one second, that Melina is called Marika of Daughter, but as I've pointed out on my Gold and Silver video, that hold on, let me pull up the tweet that I saw from, like, Noof or Sinka. So I haven't actually seen the internal files myself, but when I was actually Googling for the internal files, I came across a couple tweets by Sinka or Noof834 on Twitter. So in the the development version of Elden Ring, Marika is called Marika of Daughter, but in the Japanese here, she's called Musume Marika rather than something like Marika no Musume or Marika Ko. So rather than like daughter of Marika, so hold on, let me try to rephrase this. In the Japanese, Musume Marika comes across more like Lady Marika than daughter Marika because of just the weird way that the Japanese works. So let's go to Jisho. So this is the character that's used right here. Oh yeah, I can zoom this in. So this is like the character Musume, and this is Marika. So Musume. When you look up Musume in a dictionary, certainly the first thing that's going to come up is daughter. However, it can be used to represent girl as in a young or an unmarried woman or a maiden. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a literal little girl. And this is the character that's also used to refer to, like, the dancing girl of the dream that Aldrich saw in Dark Souls 3. And it's most likely a reference to Priscilla specifically. So what does that have to do with Melina? She could be Lady Marika, essentially, is what this tweet is getting at. And so these are the internal files. So this says, like, the meeting with Lady Marika, essentially. And then Nebula Dragon, that's the name of the Elden Beast, I think. Is Melina ever called Demigod Child? No. She's not called a demigod directly, and that's a good question, Captini, and welcome back to the stream. You always thought runes were like blood echoes, where they're like a congealed, draggy form of the slain / consumed consciousness and wills of others? Yeah, so there are certain similarities between runes and blood echoes to some degree, but There is also something fundamentally different about runes in Elden Ring that is not entirely compatible with Blood Echoes, because the gold aspect does seem to be a little bit more disambiguated from the will. Or, like, the will can be in it, but they aren't necessarily synonymous quite the same way that they are in Bloodborne. Codman, welcome into the stream, or Iman. Okay. Was there something else I wanted to say about this? Maybe, and if so, I'm forgetting.
There also is this implication that the old god and the old order must die for the new one to begin. The Sacred Relic Sword hints at this as well, stating, "Some think of it as the end of an age, while others the beginning." Sage Gowry mentions this when talking about Melania.
Age of the Elden Ring and Queen Manica, the precious Empyrean was born, a new god to forge a new order.
Queen Marika herself even describes this happening at the beginning of her rule. If we go off of all of these clues, then we can conclude that the previous order, as well as the previous god, must end so that the next order can rise up from the ashes. Let's move on to the third part of this video. What is an Empyrean's shadow? Ronnie tells us that at the same time she was chosen is when she received Blythe, in the form of a vassal tailored for an Empyrean. After speaking with Master E.G., we discover that Blythe is Lady Ronnie's stepbrother. This would make him Radagon's son, but not Lady Renala's. Ronnie's mother, Queen Renala, however, approved of him, and they placed.
So the term used for stepbrother here is interesting because let me look it up for you guys. Stepbrother. Blythe is Lady Ranny's stepbrother. All right. So the term here is ototo, but it uses this super special kanji that Miyazaki is known for. So Gite, that's like one way to say it, but not exactly. So like when you look at the other forms, ototo, so that's like the more natural way to read it. So younger stepbrother is true. So brother-in-law spouse's younger brother or younger sister's husband. So stepbrother is kind of right, but okay, so maybe I'm thinking of the Malekith thing. I might have been misremembering which was which. Because I know America is talked. All right, let me look at it on this monitor real quick because it's a little too far away. Maybe I should just look up brother. Oh yeah, there's list results. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, so I kind of was misremembering. So it was America's one, where calls Malekith her loyal half brother. Where are we at? I'm blind. Oh yeah, my mouse is literally over. Okay, yeah. So this is the same character for both of those descriptions. I don't know. I just copied it because it's already copied. So yeah, Blythe is to Ronnie what Malekith is to Marika, which I mean, oh, big surprise. I really spent like 5 minutes saying the exact thing that everybody already knew. Just because I couldn't remember which version was different. But anyway, so calling them half brothers or step brothers is like kind of fine, I guess. So no real reason for me to like harp on this other than, just to share it with you guys because I think it's interesting. All right. Insane crackpot theory, but what if Radagon is like Creary, where he can body jump? Yeah, no, I've wondered that as well. A giant born from Radagon possessed giant intercourse. All the red means. Ooh, I didn't go that far. I'll be real. Astynex always felt the relationship was odd. It was healthy and loving, so strange in a GRM story. Unless Radagon is legit. Okay. All right, back to the video.
Played like siblings from childhood. Malekith is also described by his armor as Queen Marika's loyal half-brother.
Okay, so I do feel better for stopping it because it would have come up.
It would seem that Empyreans and their shadows share some sort of familial connection. Blythe's gauntlets describe him as a man-wolf, and that he served as Rani's shadow. It's never explained why, but the Glowmide Queen was never given a shadow, nor Melania or Mikola. My guess is
It isn't necessarily true that she was never given one. If she has one, we don't necessarily know who or what it was. Though, to be fair, many do believe Vargrim wanted to be the Glowmide Queen shadow, which is an idea that I like. Although, I mean, I'll just remain on the fence about.
is that a shadow is only given to the one Empyrean chosen to ascend to godhood. This is pure speculation, of course, but it would explain why the others do not have shadows of their own. There is, however, a theory floating around that Melania is Mikola's shadow. Blythe's armor describes him as the Blade of Rani, and as everyone knows by now,
I am Melania, Blade of Mikola.
I do find this connection very interesting, but I don't believe that Melania is a shadow in the same way that Malekith and Blythe both are. Let me explain. The Raging Wolf armor states, armor worn by Vargrim, the Raging Wolf, one of the first Tarnished to visit the Round Table Hold. According to the old legends, wolves are the shadows of the Empyrean. Vargrim aspired to such a state himself. Melania is clearly not a wolf. What's more likely is that Melania, just like Vargrim, took on the role of Mikola's shadow herself. When the time came for one of the Empyreans to be given a shadow, Mikola did not receive one, so Melania chose to become one.
So, aside from the whole wolf imagery, I think it's also important to note that shadows cannot be killed or harmed in the traditional sense, because if you do aggro Blythe before Rani's two fingers are killed, he will attack you, but if you kill him and like reload the area, he'll appear as though he never died, and then he'll tell you, hey, didn't I tell you no harm can befall a shadow? And then he'll attack you. So, could you imagine beating a Melania and then coming back with Millicent's stupid needle and then having to fight her again? Man, that'd be some real next level From Software game design right there.
This is, of course, just speculation. Having said all of that, I don't think Melania and Vargrim are that far off in their way of thinking. Rani tells us that Blythe is a vassal tailored for an Empyrean. This suggests that shadows are somehow made for an Empyrean, not natural wolves born to the world of the lands between. Almost artificial in some way. And the wording is so specific too. Blythe wasn't crafted or made or even created. He was tailored for Rani. Tailored means made or changed, especially to be suitable for a particular situation or purpose. Why use this word specifically? Rani's father, Radagon,
I'm gonna look it up in a second here just to see if it's a localization thing or not.
brought with him his golden tailoring tools when he married into the Carian line. It could be that instead of Blythe's father, Radagon was his creator. Master E.G. explains what purpose Blythe serves.
2 fingers gave Blythe to Lady Rani as a faithful follower. Her very shadow, incapable of treachery. But if Lady Rani, as an Empyrean, resists being an instrument of the 2 fingers, the shadow will go mad, transforming from a follower into a horrid curse.
All right. Come on. There we go. So, as far as him being tailored for an Empyrean, this seems to just be a product of localization. So let's make this bigger for you guys. All right. So this is when she received Blythe, and he's just a special attendant of an Empyrean. So there's nothing about like being tailored. Let me look at that. No, not really. And she was just chosen by the fingers. Okay, yeah. So there's nothing really about being tailored. Yeah, so she's just like received him, but was bestowed Blythe might be like a better word. Okay, let's do this for you guys. So yeah, she was awarded or like yeah, received, bestowed, endowed with Blythe. And he's just a special like so this is yeah, follower, attendant. So come on. That's kind of like one of the unfortunate things of hyper tunneling in on specific words at time, which is why I like to double check stuff like this because it's really easy for people to I don't want to say like misinterpret, but like man, what's the word like it's kind of like imbalance misplace the importance of it. Anyway, I'm failing to articulate that thought, but yeah, okay. It just doesn't quite have as much significance as I think she believes it to have, which is a little bit unfortunate there. Wait, why? It's like not scrolling down all the way. So there's a message down here, but I can't see it. I'm gonna do that. Okay, ask next. You have a good night. The cold bothered him anyway. That's so funny. You're incredibly interested in the shadow creation process. You wish there was more on it. Okay.
Ronnie's resistance to the two fingers alters Blythe's very mind, causing him to turn on the Empyrean he was given to. This is a shadow's true purpose, a failsafe for the two fingers and the greater will. Malekith and Blythe both were made to love, protect, and follow their Empyrean, but more importantly, they were tailored to destroy them should the Empyrean disobey. And we see this happen after completing Ronnie's questline. Blythe goes mad, killing everything in his path. We hear him fighting against his fate before turning on us.
I'm part of her very being. I can never betray her, no matter what might happen. Ronnie, she needs me.
Malekith shows similar signs through his questline as Geraint, at one point even attacking the player without provocation. This could be the influence of the Greater Will and the Two Fingers. Malekith is an incredibly tragic character, suffering for almost the entirety of the game. So much of his dialogue tells us of the turmoil that he is in, asking, will things never be the same again? And Marika, why wouldst thou gull me? To gull someone is to deceive or trick them. It's possible that Queen Marika discovered the true purpose of a shadow, an instrument made to control the Empyrean, should they try to work against the Greater Will.
I'm such a contrarian sometimes. Like when she says to gull someone is to deceive them, I just like in my head, I just had a picture of a seagull like making an obscene seagull noise just pop into my mind that I almost emulated on stream and ruined everything.
Melina tells us Marika's spoken words that hint at this discovery. I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order. Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past. Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past implies that the Greater Will and the Two Fingers kept secrets from its own vassals, followers, and even their own god. Now let's move on to a more obscure aspect of the Empyreans, their offshoots.
Alright, so, Marika, why'd you turn me into a bird? Why did you deceive me? Yeah. Does the Elden Ring and Elden Beast count as an outer god for the purposes of the Michelin Needle? No. So, they're most likely the inner god of the inner order. Yeah. Malekith deserved better. He did. Well, so, like, that's the weird thing. Like, if you could really just blame the fingers for everything. I was gonna make, like, a joke about the gesture of having like two fingers and like a backwards peace sign towards the player, but I couldn't really show you guys and all that. That's kind of like what the two fingers really represent. The FU to the player base, I guess, or the FU to the shadows that they created. So yeah, if the two fingers weren't around, the shadows wouldn't have been around, and all would have been well and good. So they're the real bad guys here, because they got broken long ago.
We know of one, Millicent, a young woman in Caelid who suffers from the scarlet rot affliction. Sage Gowry tells us more about her. I'm the one who found her, a mere babe in the swamp of Aeonia. She is one of my dear daughters, but the rotting sickness erodes one's memory. It's only after stopping the progression of the rot does she start to remember, saying, I've started to...
No joke that I was like, is that my footage for a second? Just because it's really rare to see everybody else in like the full clean rot drip going up here. And that's what I rocked like my first playthrough a lot, so it just kind of distracted me for a second. And then I was going to say something else. Yeah. The Scarlet Rot eroding memory is really, really fascinating to me because of like all that other stuff relating to memory and willpower, especially in Elden Ring, and the sense of identity that comes along with it, and memories kind of being intrinsically linked to gold in the form of remembrances. The video capture showing a paused video? Rot dementia? Wait, right now? I mean, I did pause the video to hit. And also, welcome to the stream. Empyreans deep dive paused at 12:50? What are you talking about? So I'm going to hit play, and if it plays for you, let me know.
You recall, but dimly, my destiny. My name is Millicent. This confirms the memory loss. Gowry also refers to Melania as Millicent's mother. Her destiny leads her all the way to the Halig Tree, a near impossible task. When meeting her again in Alphael, Millicent reveals more about herself.
I am of Melania's blood, but in what capacity I know not. I could be sister, daughter, or an offshoot. Whatever the case, though, I am certain of a kinship between us.
And so that's one of the other annoying things to consider, is that if Millicent is like a full-on clone of Melania, should she also technically be an Empyrean if 100% of her DNA is Melania's DNA? There's probably something else a bit more going on, because believe it or not, she's technically tarnished, so she's susceptible to Deathroot and going frenzied. Believe it or not. Yeah, anyway.
Millicent is less of a daughter and more of a copy, or an offshoot as she calls it. Her physical appearance is almost identical to Melania's, including her missing right arm. But what do...
Well, the tarnished cut off her right arm, essentially. No, but in all seriousness, yeah, that's really weird to hit. Is it fixed for you now? I mean, obviously, like, I paused the video again, but I don't actually know if I have the footage still on this hard drive. But the first time you encounter Millicent in the swamp of Ionia, she does have two legitimate arms. So it's really weird, because you can encounter her in the Church of Rot first, and then she won't invade you. So I think the takeaway is you cut off Millicent's arm, kind of like the whole joke from Arrested Development. It's like, this is why you should always leave a note. Ignore my headgear. I had to be able to cast the stupid sorcery. See, she's got two arms, guys. And I turned off the AI so I could, like, do this with impunity. Two legitimate arms. Though to be fair, this is kind of technically her spirit body rather than like her real body. And some of these NPCs are a bit more resistant to the death blight. Alright, let's look, she's gonna get death rotted. Or death blighted. She did. Okay. That's a lot of Scarlet Rotwater, yeah. Is Elden Ring like Dark Souls where phantoms / signs / invaders can exist irrespective of their real world physical timeline / life status? Yes, and that's more or less confirmed with what happens with Dung Eater, because his phantom in the Round Table Hold talks to you and recognizes you, but his body doesn't, which is really weird. There's also some weird stuff going on with the bike in that his phantom in Liurnia, but like his body is allegedly in the Everjail in like the mountaintops. Invader Millicent can do waterfowl, right? Yes. And so can like the normal Millicent. I said it as you were typing it, yeah. It's amazing that the lands between isn't more of an ecological disaster than it already is. Okay. Let me pull the video back up. All right, here we go.
What does this have to do with the other Empyreans? The interesting thing is that it doesn't, or so I thought. At first, I thought Millicent was an anomaly, a rare occurrence caused by the Scarlet Aeonia.
Oops, now I just stepped all over her toes by discussing my woes. That rhymed, don't you knows?
Now I believe I was wrong. Each of the Empyreans has a counterpart, an offshoot of some sort, an entirely other being that shares too many similarities for it to just be a coincidence. Melina is a mysterious character that literally appears out of thin air. Melina explains multiple times during our journey together to the Erdtree that she has to ascertain for herself the reason for which I live, burned and bodiless. She tells us that she was born at the foot of the Erdtree, where Mother gave me my purpose, though now everything is lost to me. This demonstrates obvious signs of memory loss, similar to Millicent. She also speaks about her purpose, saying, "My purpose was long ago lost." Yet another similarity to Millicent, who mentions her destiny. Melina and Millicent also wear the same style of tunic, the traveler's clothes, which are worn by young women who set off into the world to confront their fate.
Yeah, in like the former Japanese quick description of the Traveler set that you can find outside, what's it called? Outside of the Elfile like flower area, it said like it belonged to Melania, which was weird, and I think this was probably a typo because Melania isn't that far apart from Melina. But anyway, not too important. Also, that flower didn't exist in 1.0, so there's like a bunch of weird things that just don't quite match up with what we ended up getting in retail.
Melina also tells us that her mother is inside the Erdtree. The mother...
So Captini asks, are the spirit forms created on purpose, or do they manifest for some other reason? That's a very good question. Some are definitely created on purpose, but are some made for some other reason? Maybe, because like it does seem out of character for Millicent to invade us. There might be something going on that's similar to what's going on with Roger and what's his name, Leo of Via's bedside champions, because Roger said like he apologizes in advance because he thinks he's going to wrong us and we're so scary, and so it seems like not every spirit is there of its own volition, at least with Roger as like the one tangible example of that. But his is also like a blue spirit, so maybe that's supposed to be different. I don't know.
inside the Erd tree she is referring to is more than likely Queen Marika, who also was an Empyrean, so this could mean Melina is Marika's offshoot. However, the line regarding her current state doesn't match that idea. Burned and bodiless describes another Empyrean, Ranni the Witch. The Empyrean flesh she discarded at the top of the Liurnian Divine Tower is obviously burned. The animation for their departure is the same. There's also the
All right. You ready? Here's the real crackpot theory. Melina is Ranni, but Ranni is Marika. What do you think?
the connection of their physical appearance, with each of them having one eye shut. So Melina could also be Ranni's offshoot. It's really unclear. Unlike Melina, the connections between Miquella and Saint Trina are plenty, and they're pretty compelling. Trina's lily is a pale purple water lily that is on the verge of wilting, a symbol of faith in Saint Trina. Miquella's lily is also a delicate water lily of unalloyed gold that has started to fade and wilt, and it too is a symbol of faith, but in the Halig tree. Saint Trina's sword depicts two lilies on the handle, both stretching down towards the blade.
So Captain asks, could you create a spirit unwillingly? So yes, but probably not exactly what you're thinking of with like the spirit form. So you could say like all the ghost dudes are unwilling spirits. I don't know if you could have like the same type of dung eater spirit manifest unwillingly. That's an interesting thought. I mean, like I said, there is the Roger thing, but that's about it.
The sword also states that Saint Trina's appearance was as sudden as their disappearance. Miquella was cursed with eternal childhood, and Saint Trina is described as a comely young girl. I use the pronoun she very loosely because Saint Trina's gender is not 100% confirmed, since the description of the Sword of Saint Trina describes them as both a girl and possibly a boy. Now, there is some cut content that pretty much confirms Miquella was going to be Saint Trina in disguise, but since it's cut, I won't be applying it to this theory. So it's entirely possible that Saint Trina was reworked instead to be an offshoot of Miquella.
So even without the cut content, I think you could still very easily make those connections because Miquella's lily is Saint Trina's lily. One is gold, the other is purple. So, I mean, the imagery is still like present in the final version of the game. So while it isn't explicit, it's pretty much all but explicit at this point. Don't the cookbooks basically confirm it? That's what I thought. I thought there was one description which made it clearer that Saint Trina was female, but I couldn't remember exactly what it was off the top of my head. But I'm pretty sure it is a cookbook, and that's probably why I don't remember which specific one. But yeah.
Now, what is an offshoot? An offshoot can be interpreted to mean several different things, but the one I'm going to focus on is an idea present in other Dark Souls games. In Dark Souls 2, we meet the daughters of Manus, who are less daughters and more pieces of his soul. They each also represent different aspects of Manus himself, like wrath and desire. A soul is a physical, tangible thing that can also become fragmented. Those fragments can gain consciousness and eventually become their own beings. Could it be possible then that the offshoots in Elden Ring are also pieces of an Empyrean soul? Malenia's soul, for instance, could have split due to the Scarlet Aeonia's bloom, creating her daughters. Millicent could very well be Malenia.
And that's not like the most awful idea. Miyazaki has said in an interview that there's like some, I don't remember exactly verbatim what it was, but there is something about like, fudge. I don't want to say like multiple personalities within them, but something along those lines. But that sounds a lot stronger than the quote was. I would need to like look it up. I apologize for kind of screwing it up here right now. And Uncle says, You might sound like an idiot for saying it, but you feel like FromSoft's knack for reusing systems here has contributed heavily to an inability to separate Tarnish / Phantoms from their Souls counterpart. Like, yeah, they just exist like in Dark Souls. It's the same thing, so you're not going to explain, except for how they're different, which they are. Whereas Phantoms are explained in Dark Souls and Demon Souls because they were new. So, like I said, there is some similarities between them, and there is some like actual textual evidence for this. So let me go ahead and pull it up. Finger might be enough. Oh fudge, I might too far down. Why is it so far down? Okay, finger. Oh, what did I press? Wait. It's like starting off in the middle of the page and then like the top, and I know it's nearer to the top. Not this one. Nope, nope. Okay, so Moog's Great Rune. No, I'm thinking of something else. Wait, is that it? Let me double check that. Okay, nope. Phantom Great Rune. Spirit Calling Bell is close, but not quite. I was thinking of like one of the fingers, but it has to do with Moog. Maybe I should have just typed in Moog. Or is it Phantom that I need to look up? Alright, was this it? Not quite. So one of the like the finger items talks about it a bit more. Okay, wait. It's weird. All right, well, one of the items talks about it a bit more directly, that you send your spirit. Oh, wait. Its blessing grants a blessing of blood to summon phantoms and imparts a phantom great rune upon successful invasion. So there is like something to it. But all right, I just don't remember exactly the wording for what I'm thinking of. But yeah. So they're not like fully the Dark Souls thing, but it is kind of similar. They contain multitudes. Is that the quote, Stella? If you have the full one, please link it in the chat. Fever's cookbooks? Okay, it's the Bewitching Branch one. Okay, let me look that up. Fever. So Trina's non-gendered here. At least in this. Oh, wait, no. Sagel. Duh. Saint Trina itself is gendered. So, like, Holy Woman Trina. Yeah, so Saint Trina is definitely female. So, let me look back at the chat. You thought Trina was an alternative persona or a switching body Mikula controls in its sleep, etc. Being aware yet not awake, the same could be for Melly? I'm not sure which Melly you mean. Yet not as centered inner cohesively. She doesn't know. Oh, okay. Thanks, Stella. Alright. Going back into the video.
Nia's pride. If the player chooses to help her fight, she still chooses to die in the end. Instead of allowing herself to be changed or controlled, she'd rather perish, stating, "If I am to flower into something other than myself, I would rather rot into nothingness as I am." Melania's second phase of her boss battle is so instrumental to this concept, as she once again rises from defeat by accepting the scarlet rot inside of her.
Something I must return to Melania. The will that was once her own. The dignity. The sense of self. That allowed her to resist the call of the scarlet rot. The pride she abandoned. To meet Radahn's measure.
Had Millicent made it to Melania, perhaps she could have resisted the rot's call. It's possible that this is the same thing we're seeing in Melina's questline as well. This is total speculation, but if Melina is in fact Marika's offshoot, she could in theory be Marika's sense of purpose, as Millicent is Melania's sense of pride.
So, the part of the reason that Millicent could have Melania's quote-unquote sense of pride could literally be because of being suffused with the golden needle that may have originally been in Melania, and the whole aspect of that could be tied into the unalloyed gold needle being suffused with willpower specifically, and willpower itself might be necessary to repel the influence of the outer gods. That's kind of my big takeaway from that whole thing, and I go into a lot of depth about that in my video about gold and silver if you want a lot more detail about that.
Could be yet another way for an outer god to control an Empyrean. By fragmenting their very soul, it leaves the Empyrean without a sense of self, empty, almost like a vessel. Now there is another who fits the bill, but it's a little more complicated, and that's none other than the king of complicated himself, second Elden Lord Radagon. Melina tells us that Marika described him as mine other self, a leal hound. Leal meaning loyal. As we've seen with Melania and Manus, it is possible for a soul to split into multiple fragments, meaning Radagon could very well be another offshoot of Queen Marika's soul. Radagon may not seem like the most loyal of individuals, considering he broke his vow and abandoned his first wife, but if you've been following my Radagon videos, you'd know that I theorized Radagon's betrothal to Rennala as part of the Greater Will's plan. A plan to plant the Amber Egg, as well as stifle the Full Moon's champion, Lady Rennala herself. If we look at it from that angle, then Radagon is extremely loyal, even to the point of breaking his own word, since his true loyalty never lied with Rennala. It was always with the Golden Order and Queen Marika. This could mean that Radagon, as an offshoot, could represent Marika's sense of loyalty. I've spent a lot of time analyzing and searching for Radagon's true origins, and this is one of my favorites, though it is not without its pitfalls. So let me know what you think an offshoot means in the comment sections, and whether or not you think Radagon is one. I'd love to hear your theories. Now let's jump back to what being an Empyrean actually means, starting with the meaning of the word itself. Empyrean refers to the heavens, or more specifically, a heavenly place where God's will and the souls of humans become one. I think the creators of Elden Ring took that meaning and bent it to better fit their narrative. An Empyrean in the lands between is a being in which the greater will and the human body become one. The greater will uses the Empyrean as a vessel for the beast it sent down to the lands between all those years ago. It is a way for the greater will to not only exert control over the lands between, but also to garner faith. An Empyrean, just like their shadows, are simply yet another tool for the greater will to use. Ronnie the Witch.
That was really good crucifixion footage there. I'm a little bit jealous. But since I paused, okay, what was I gonna say right before that? Damn it. Not crucifixion. Empyreans. Alright. So, Empyreans, yeah, this is one of those cases where I'm not sure if it's an English to Japanese to English type thing or Japanese to English thing, where focusing on the word Empyrean might be tunnel visioning a little too far, because it could have been a word used in Japanese first with Shinjin. It could have been George R. R. Martinism for all we know. So it's just one of those things where like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, and I don't know. So yeah, I just don't know about that part. The Elden Beast command grab is such a great animation you rarely get to see. Bro, I had to farm for like 3 hours to try to get him to grab me a couple times because he does so many attacks that he prioritizes above that one. So I have like 2 clips of me getting it in like slow-mo. It was such a pain to get. So I can only imagine how long it took her to get that as well. Probably a lot easier than me, for just my luck.
Tells us exactly why she destroyed her own flesh. I would not be controlled by that thing. Thank you so much for watching my video on Empyreans. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like down below. And to all of my new subscribers, thank you so much for joining us on these little theory and lore videos. I'm so happy to see all of you joining in on the conversation. Don't forget to comment down below any questions, suggestions, or corrections. I'm always looking for new ideas or topics to add to my ever-growing list, so drop them down below as well. And as always, I can't wait to talk to you all on the next one. Bye!
Alright, so that was another enjoyable video. I'm going to go ahead and link it into the chat right now. Oop, let's get rid of all that. Okay. Alright, so that was another one by Kite Tails. Or no, that was A Human Just a Car that we just watched. And, right. So obviously I don't really agree with the whole idea of... She didn't really go into it too much like this time around. She just kind of hinted at it a bit. Of Ranni being directly descended from America / Radagon rather than Rennala. Because we have other descriptions which call Rennala Ranni's mother, so that's just something that I'm like pretty strongly opposed to. Although I think it's perfectly fine to kind of like have those theories. It's just one that I disagree with. All right, so anyway, you feel like Trina made it feel like you thought Mikola was in some way trying to fool people. I don't think so. So I think the issue is that like Mikola is kind of given a body that doesn't serve him the way he wants it to. Maybe because he's cursed with eternal childhood or eternal youth and he can't grow older. We don't necessarily know enough about Mikola in that he might have wanted to give life to things. There could be a kind of feminine aspect to him. There could just be the mismatch of like the person that he feels he is on the inside is better served like in the dream world than in reality, and in the dream world he's not really fettered by his physical constructs, and so he's more free to express himself as female or more androgynous in nature. Whether or not you want to call that gender fluid is fine. I think probably in the dream world it has less consequences. So I guess an ad is running now, so I'll just like wait maybe 30 seconds or so to get off onto the next tangent. So while that happens, if anybody's able to see this right now, I'm going to go ahead and transition into the next video and getting it queued up, and then I'll talk about the Mikola thing a little bit more while I waffle. You feel like Ranni isn't a Radagon / America baby because she doesn't seem to have any overt deformity. That's a funny way to phrase it. But yeah, I get what you're saying with that. You feel like Mikola and Melania's curses are both alluding to the deformities that come from incest? Yeah, potentially. You thought that Mikola used that female form while he was sleeping in the tree? Maybe. His curse renders his potential unreachable? Yes. Ava asks, how exactly is gender fluid unnecessarily complex in the first place when this is a game involving gods? So that's not really directed at me. I don't know. what that is. All right, so what was I saying before the ad ran? Right, so Mikola, so yeah, with Mikola kind of being able to control things in the dreams, potentially, I just don't think that the traditional concepts of gender and body specifically are as constraining, so he's more free to do whatever he wants. And so I think he plays on that. So there's a lot of different ways that this can be read. So one could be that Mikola is being more true to the inner self within him. Another could be as who said it a moment ago, like fooling other people. I'm sorry. Whoever said that, I apologize. I'm really bad with remembering who said what at times. All right, it was Kim Lee. So fooling people, it could it. I see how you could come to that conclusion as well, because there is a certain kind of power in being able to control your appearance and or use that against others. But Mikola's also kind of unnerving when he appears as an adult as Saint Trina, it said. So there might just be a kind of power dynamic of being able to shift your gender at will that doesn't necessarily match the one you may have been born with. But I don't know. We would really need more information to see where they go with that. And having, I don't want to say like gender fluid or maybe like non-binary. I don't exactly know the proper terminology with which to describe them, but there is a history of that in the FromSoft games with Dark Sun Gwendolyn being presented as female despite, being male. So, yeah. Captini says, if you're not wrong, in Asian mythology, it's very common to genre swap or present. Did you mean gender swap or present what everyone feels? So yeah, it depends on the region, and it is. I mean, not as much in Japan, but I mean, certainly maybe a bit more than like the West, I guess. But I think it's like more common in places like Thailand, but I'm not super familiar myself. We need the Shadow of the Urchi DLC to clear up Mikola's MO. Yeah. Alright, so yeah, that was a fun video by Human Justicar, and now we'll be transitioning into Who Was the Snow Witch by Kite Tales. Alright, here we go.
Hey everyone, it's Kite Tales, and welcome back to another video about Elden Ring and
Here
a
we go.
deep dive into some of the lore and outstanding questions I still have about this game.
I'll
So
bump it up a little
originally
bit.
this video was just going to be about the rises, which are those towers you find all around the map that you had to open by finding the 3 wise ones, those super annoying ghost turtles. But then this turned into a, well, who was Ronnie's secret mentor video, because I think that question is answered in part by understanding what the rises are and who they belong to and the significance of where they are located. So just laying some groundwork down before we look into the identity of the mysterious Snow Witch, let's take a look at these rises. There are 12 of these in total, and I think that they were established after Renala became head of Raya Lucaria, and I came to this conclusion because of the geography
I think that's Moonlight Sonata playing in the background, which kind of makes a lot of sense for Ani. It's barely audible, so I might not be hearing it properly, though.
of where they are located. So the highest concentration of them are in Liurnia, and we find 3 of them bunched up right together behind Caria Manor, so this was clearly an important area to protect and defend. The rises have the seal of Raya Lucaria on the doors, which is the same seal guarding the academy, and the same seal as the booby trap spells found all around Caria Manor, and also other Carian controlled points like the Moonfolk runes. And this seal is different from the seal of the Carian sorceries, so I think that we can date the creation of these rises to Renala becoming head of the academy and establishing her family as royalty and wanting to keep herself safe and protected.
So I don't necessarily know about that, and I think it is also very possible that some of these towers could have been retrofitted with the Carian barriers. But yeah.
The two rises that stand out are the converted tower and the converted fringe tower, which contain statues of America. And this is because during the First Liurnian War, these two rises were captured by Ratigan and the Lindell armies, thus the name converted towers. And while nearly every single one of these rises is surrounded by these beautiful deep blue flowers representing the presence of glintstone magic, the presence of Caria, the converted tower is surrounded by yellow flowers, signifying a full capture by the army of the Golden Order. And even more interestingly, there is a detail that I have only now just realized, and that is that the ground of the Church of Vows is covered in a mixture of blue and yellow flowers, which symbolizes the union of the houses of the Erd Tree and of the Moon. And I thought this
I could see that. At first, I was a little bit more skeptical, and just the nature of the type of person I am tempted to like go back to some of the fringe towers in like the Weeping Peninsula to see what flora are around that tower specifically.
was such a cute detail and just a testament to how much work went into designing the environment of this game. The rises all have the same interior, and they look like a typical wizard's library or a research room, and I think that's what they were originally used for surveillance and studying sorcery, charting the stars, the moon, and I also found that the majority of them seem to be within sight of these minor Erd trees, like these rises were established in order to keep an eye on those pesky Erd tree offshoots. So we can understand Ranni's rise and Celavis's rise as this is where they lived, but who was Renna? Renna has extreme significance to Ranni, as this is the name that she uses when Ranni first...
So, yeah, I think I could be more on board with that Rise Spy Tower theory if I could see like the timeline working a bit better for it. But then I don't think that really works up with having the three rises over here behind Caria Manor, because there's not really a minor Erd tree down here to work with that. There's also no like tower or rise next to the minor Erd tree in the Mount Gelmir area. There is the Mirage Tower kind of by the Wormface one in the middle of Altus Plateau, but there's not also a rise by some of the other areas, like the dead one above Lanedell itself. So anyway,
introduces herself. Her appearance is modeled after her mentor, the Snow Witch, and it's at Renna's Rise that the Snow Witch set can be found. Although there is this weird thing when E.G. mentions Renna's Rise, he seems to have this inflection in his voice that makes it seem as if this was a personal name that Ranni used and not necessarily the true name of the Rise.
Lady Ranni has departed on her journey along the dark path of the Empyrean, from Renna's Rise, as she calls it.
I asked on a poll on YouTube who everyone thought the Snow Witch was, and overwhelmingly the answer was Renna. So this still doesn't answer the question of who is Renna, and as influential as the Snow Witch was to Ranni, we don't know much anything about her. Her pointed hat is described as being a style associated with practitioners of heretical sorcery, and her set explains that a young Ranni encountered her deep in the woods. She was a witch and well-versed in cold sorceries. It is said that the doll that houses Ranni's soul was modeled after her. So if this is...
Right, so Captini says, they wonder how much language you speak affects what you see as feminine. Where they're from, we don't have feminine or masculine words or words for he and she. You find these concepts to be so weird sometimes because of that? That's very interesting. If you don't mind me asking, where are you from and where you don't really have words for he or she? Because, yeah. I mean, that certainly definitely plays a role in the impact of people, like, the thoughts that people can have. I believe it was, like, Noam Chomsky who really helped pioneer that philosophical, like, train of thought that languages can shape what thoughts people can have intrinsically. So yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. Finland. Okay, very interesting. All right, thanks, Howdy. Yeah, it looked really interesting, but like I said, after what happened to Haikyuu, I'm really reticent to just jump into an ongoing series that has the potential to just get flushed down the toilet for whatever reason, which is beyond me. Yeah, there's a whole theory surrounding language and color, though you don't think it holds up today. So, oh man, I'm trying to remember what tribes they were. Maybe it was like the Aborigines. So I know there's certain tribes throughout the world who don't have distinctions between like left and right, and so they have the way that they would demarcate direction was all cardinally. So they would use my north arm, my south leg, my west arm, my west leg, you know? So left and right doesn't really matter to them. It's all what is north, what is south, what is east, and what's west, which is really fascinating. So they, because of that, they all have a much stronger of where north is at all times than people in cultures who don't use language that way. So yeah, obviously, since I'm a language nerd, that stuff is just endlessly fascinating to me. Sapir-Whorf hypothesis? Maybe. I'm gonna look that up if I can highlight. Okay, or not. Bruh. Okay. Structure of a language determines a native speaker's perception and categorization of experience. Yes, that's what I was talking about. So, yeah, okay. I'll save that later for myself, and thank you for that.
Literal, then the Rani we encounter in the game has the appearance of the Snow Witch, which means that she might have had blue skin and 4 arms. The only blue-skinned 4-armed beings that we see in the game are wraith callers, who use a bell to summon malevolent wraiths. So is it possible that the Snow Witch was a wraith caller? Possibly. Rani is how they might have looked in their youth once upon a time. And their arms aren't grafted onto their body. It seems like they are actually part of their skin.
Yeah, the Revenants really look messed up and a lot more grafted than the Wraith Callers.
Looks like they just have 4 arms. The wraith callers also use a bell, and Rani is the one who gives you these.
I also really liked that the bells are kind of like lilies, and that's kind of related to some of the other previous Dark Souls games. Like I know like there's the Bellvine type chime catalyst thing, and obviously in Elden Ring, Bellvines are no, not Bellvines. What are they called? Like the Gloveworts? They're kind of shaped like but maybe this isn't too obvious for you guys. Or what are they called? Glovewort? So the Gloveworts are kind of shaped like Suzu Bell. Oh, okay, no, this one will look better. Well, if it's not tiny. Yeah, so I mean, it kind of looks bad because of like the transparency and whatnot, but Suzu Bale. So if you look at a Suzu, which is a type of bell, it's very similar to like the glovewort that we were just looking at. So bells can have timbers which traverse dimensions, which is kind of like a thing in Bloodborne. It gets reused a little bit in Dark Souls and kind of repurposed ever so slightly in Elden Ring. So it's just something of a bit of cultural context that the Japanese are more likely to pick up than we are. How many beings does the Lands Between have? That's a good question. About Tree Fitty.
Spirit calling bell and says that it belonged to Torrent's former master. And while the wraith callers do ride horses, I'm not so sure if they're the same species as Torrent. There's also a group of these Wraithcallers and a Revenant found at the Lunar Estate Ruins, which is where the Carians presumably used to reside at one time. So there might be a little connection here to this theory, but I don't think this argument of the Snow Witch being a Wraithcaller is really strong enough to say for certain. Ronnie's puppet body,
I believe you also fight the Royal Revenant before the ruins right before EG, which I forget what they're called off the top of my head. So there are kind of a couple more Revenants and that kind of thing in Carian proximity, although that doesn't help explain the random ass Revenants in the bottom of the Halig tree, now does it? But to be fair, in earlier drafts of the story or like earlier versions of the game, many of the knights and whatnot in the Halig tree were gifted from Radigan to Mikola, so there are like still some allegedly incidental connections between Karya and the Halig tree forces with Loretta and whatnot.
he could also just be a repurposed marionette soldier, which is the other four-armed beings we find in game, because these artificial soldiers were created to serve the sorcerers, and the majority of them are found around Liurnia and Re Lucaria, and it doesn't seem like they have any particular allegiance to either the Carian family or the Academy, but rather the sorcerer who commissioned them. But there is one rise where you see a good number of these marionette puppets stationed, and that is at the heretical rise in the consecrated snowfields. And there are a ton of them in this area. It's a super high concentration for just this one rise. So they are either protecting the inhabitant of this rise, or they were stationed here to keep someone from leaving it. I also think it's interesting to note that this rise can only be accessed through the back on an invisible bridge. Someone, whoever lived here, escaped from the tower.
Does anyone know if that path is more visible on console? Because this looks way better than it ever did for me on PC.
By making this invisible bridge so that they couldn't be followed and they couldn't be tracked. That is at least how I'm imagining it in my head. So I'm kind of leaning towards the theory that whoever was here was under house arrest and they later escaped through the back using this invisible bridge. So there are a few connections we can make here in this location to the Snow Witch. For one, her hat is being described as the fashion of heretical sorcerers, and the name of this rise is the Heretical Rise.
And of course, the whole hat being a heretical sign is just like a little bit of a FromSoft nod to FromSoft, because it's kind of like a knockoff of the Zully the Witch style hat from the Dark Souls games, or Yuria from Demon Souls and whatnot.
It's also in the consecrated snowfields, which is another link
All right,
to the
Kinley,
Snow
have a
Witch
good
and
one.
her snow sorceries. And then we have the multitude of four-armed marionette soldiers, which may be a reference to the sorcerer that created them to guard this rise. It's also here that you can find the Founding Reign of Stars spell, which is described as the eldest primeval sorcery said to have been discovered by an ancient astrologer. So this is the OG.
I believe it's called the eldest glintstone sorcery, not just the eldest primeval one. So slightly different, a little bit important. What are the words? The consequences of that? Anyway.
Sorcery. This is the foundation of all of the glintstone sorcery that followed. And it was discovered by an ancient astrologer, which might mean that the inhabitant of the heretical rise, like Renala, was once an astrologer. And we know that astrologers predated sorcerers based on the description of the Sword of Night and Flame, which says that astrologers preceded the sorcerers and established themselves in the mountaintops that nearly touched the sky. Renala was an astrologer.
Maybe I'll also need to reference that item when I complain about the stupid astrologer robe description. Wait, why aren't sleep spells called snorceries? That's whack. Blame the localizers for that one.
In her youth, and later became the Full Moon Witch. And the sorcerer painting puzzle leads you to the consecrated snowfields and this location to find the Great Hood. And that is described as a burial shroud for those who discover at long last the truth they sought. Surely this is the moon that the young Renala gazed upon. And this spot right here, where you can see that moon clear as crystal, is next to the Stargazer's ruins. So we can assume this is where the astrologers must have lived next to their neighbors, the fire giants. The Stargazer heirloom says that the young astrologer gazed at the night sky as she walked. She'd always chased the stars at every step of her journey, and then she met the moon, and in time the astrologer became a queen.
So I think that's a very good set of observations right there, that if there were any specific place for Renala to have encountered the moon, it could have been by the Stargazer ruins. Of course, it isn't explicit, but it's, I think, as good an explanation as any.
The telescope has some really interesting information that I had never seen before, and it's described as being an astrology tool used by members of the Carian royal family. During the age of the Erd Tree, Carian astrology withered on the vine. The fate once writ in the night skies had been fettered by the Golden Order, and fettered means shackled and restrained. To me, this sounds like Renala didn't even have a choice in her leaving the Carian path of astrology. That
it's just because she's the old ball and chain, right, guys?
the Erd Tree had the same kind of effect on obscuring the stars, like light pollution. It just choked it out. This means that the reason astrologers became sorcerers in the first place and pursued glintstone magic was because they had to adapt to the Erd Tree killing their stargazing. So all of the rises that were most likely linked to astrology at one time transitioned to the pursuit of glintstone sorcery. There is one theory that proposes Renala was the Snow Witch in disguise, and that Rena was just...
Yeah, so the whole description about when the age of the Erd Tree was and when the Golden Order caused the Carian astrology to wither on the vine is very interesting and kind of problematic, because if you interpret the Golden Order as being before, like, when Godfrey becomes Elden Lord, that's like one thing, but it's also a little bit different if you say that's when Radigan became Elden Lord, because during the age of the Erd Tree is vague enough that it could be able to describe either Godfrey or Radigan's timeline. So if so, when was Carian astrology active, and or why? Typically, the way that I look at the description about the Erd Tree, or sorry, the Golden Order fettering Carian astrology specifically, I think that most likely coincides with Radigan becoming, having a literal union with Renala. I should double check the Japanese to make sure it, like, the term for shackled is meant in a more it meant more in the sense of like matrimony. Where we at? Telescope. So here we go. For you guys, we should turn this on. So it's to be tied, to be fastened. It doesn't necessarily mean it in the sense of like marriage, but I mean, it kind of does. It's similar. Just like, yeah. Shackled is a pretty decent way to describe it. Maybe bonded? Bonded might be like a better way, but it's just, flavor. Okay. So not too terribly important.
a nickname she used, because it's here in the consecrated snowfields that Renala left the path of astrologer and pursued lunar sorcery. You would think here in this environment with the Zamor and the Zamor's ice magic, it might have given Renala an opportunity to learn cold sorcery. The description of Renala's full moon states that Queen Renala encountered this enchanting moon when she was young, and later it would bewitch the academy. So we know that the sorcerer painting, we know that based on this description of her remembrance, this happened in the...
All right, yeah, that's what I meant to talk about with the whole timeline thing. So if Karian astrology withered on the vine with the Golden Order and whatnot, the question becomes when exactly did it get fettered? Because was it doing its own thing before Godfrey's time? Was it still doing its thing after Godfrey's time? Did it get binded by the time of Radigan? Or did it also get binded, or not also, or did it get binded because of what Radon did when he held up the fate in the night sky in like Caelid and whatnot? So it's just not clear, but the implications of each scenario has very important weight, I guess you could say. Rana could have been from Zamor or Zamorian, potentially, yes.
Consecrated snowfields, putting her in a location to be introduced to lunar sorcery, but also she may have had the opportunity to learn cold sorcery. Rani's Dark Moon states that this moon was encountered by a young Rani, led by the hand of her mother, Renala. What she beheld was cold, dark, and veiled in occult mystery. Now, all of the cold sorceries associated with the Snow Witch have the same description. Sorcery said to have been used by the old Snow Witch. The snowy crone taught the young Rani to fear the dark moon as she imparted her cold sorcery. We have two instances of a young Rani being introduced to these different sorceries seemingly around the same time during her youth. Renala teaches Rani lunar sorcery, and the Snow Witch teaches her cold sorcery. But whereas Renala discovered the full moon in the consecrated snowfields, Rani most likely discovered it at the Moonlight Altar because it's only at this location on the map that you can see both the full moon and the dark moon. And there is something else here that you can see at the Moonlight Altar, and that is snow. It's floating around throughout the air, and it's not glintstone mist, which you can see specks of at Caria Manor and at the Three Sisters. This here definitely appears to be snow. From the windows of the Cathedral of Manus Celeste, you can see the full moon and the dark moon. And this cathedral actually has the same architecture as the Church of Vows, which I thought was really interesting. It also has the same statues of a hooded knight, and I think that this figure is Radigan, which would make sense.
And these dudes also show up by all like the Divine Towers and whatnot. So Marauders, welcome into the stream. You say, don't say Aborigine, just say Native Australians or First Nations Australians. Interesting. I've never heard of a distinction between the two before. Thank you for letting me know. So yeah, with this guy appearing in so many other places, I know some people like to believe he's Radigan, but I'm just more skeptical of it because they show up elsewhere, like in the elevator that leads from Noxtella down towards the Onsel River.
As he's featured here at the cathedral as the husband of the Full Moon Witch, and also at the Church of Vows where he and Renala were married. And in the southernmost tip of the Moonlight Altar is Chilona's Rise, which is where you find Rani's Dark Moon spell. So I think we can say for certainty that we now know the location of where Rani learned her Dark Moon sorcery and also her cold sorcery.
And that's where I would have an issue with the language used there, saying that they know for certain. It's, just an assumption. It's a hypothesis. Just because it's a likely assumption or hypothesis, that's okay, but that doesn't actually make it a certainty.
So the proponents of this theory that believe the Snow Witch was just Renala in disguise might argue, isn't that just so convenient to have this sorcerer show up and secretly mentor Rani at the same exact time Renala just so happens to be there also mentoring Rani. But I think there is enough distinction to illustrate that Renala was a lunar witch. She was not a snow witch. And also the cold spells say that the Snow Witch taught Rani to fear the dark moon, whereas Renala was the one who guided her towards it. So it seems to be contradicting instructions right there.
So fear in this case doesn't mean fear as in to be afraid of. It means fear as in respect, like God-fearing, that kind of idea. So I don't really blame like Kite Tails for taking it that one way. What else is I gonna say? Oh yeah. So, I think one reason. So I was a pretty. I don't want to say like a big fan of it, but I definitely toyed around with the idea of Renala being the snow crone because it makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, which Kite Tails has gone into quite a bit here, which I appreciate. But ultimately, with the puppet of Ronnie being modeled on the Snow Witch specifically, I think because her puppet doesn't really look like Renala, that sways me more than anything to not believe that Renala was the Snow Witch specifically, which doesn't mean like it's impossible, but I think that's just kind of like the biggest hurdle for me to get over for now, at least.
But what if Rena was just a repurposed marionette puppet that Renala commissioned Celavis to make and disguise for her so that she could teach Ronnie these cold sorceries that she learned from the Zamora during her youth as this?
Now, that's an interesting idea right there. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be from Pija or Celavis to have like commissioned the doll, but yeah, the fact that Renala could have surreptitiously taught Ronnie through the form of a doll is really fascinating.
This mysterious mentor from the woods. There is something very curious and suspicious about the Snow Witch's spells. So the Glintstone Ice Crag and Freezing Mist can only be purchased through Celavis. Why does Celavis have 2 of the 3 Snow Witch spells? The third spell is found at Karya Manor, by the way, which just solidifies her relationship to the family. And the other 2 spells that Celavis sells are the Karian sorceries. So he has the Snow Witch spells because 1, she was obviously a part of the royal family, and 2, he is probably the one that made her puppet body in the first place. So something must have either...
So I think those are a couple big jumps, and yeah, so when we look at both Blythe and Adula, we're shown them being able to use cold affinity magic because of their vow to Ronnie, and I think it's a cut item at this point, but in the 1.0 version of like the freezing mist pot, or maybe it's still in the full game. Freezing. Freezing pots. I don't remember if this is cut or not because I don't use the pots enough to really remember. But the freezing pot says it originates from the cold dark moon of Rani, the Karian princess. So I'm pretty sure that might be cut, but if not, even better. So there's like an affinity of like the transitive property of being a vassal of Rani enables you to like use cold magic essentially, and so Celavis having access to these sorceries isn't that surprising to me, particularly since a random ass dragon can use these sorceries. Fumbling around with the idea that Mariko's involved with the Snow Witch to use the cold magic against the fire giants. Yeah, I've wondered whether or not Marika could have had a hand in the Snow Witch presentation as well, but it's just so annoying trying. It's like Marika can fit everywhere. it's so damn annoying. She is like the real Velka of Elden Ring, isn't she? So, at the very least, if she was taught Ronnie like snow stuff, that's fine, and she might have wanted like the lunar stuff for her own nefarious purposes. It's weird. Okay.
happened to run his original body. Maybe she possibly died in her pursuit of heretical cold sorcery, and Celavis had to make her a puppet body to transfer her soul. So he modifies a marionette soldier puppet to house it, and maybe that was the start of his puppet obsession. Maybe after Rena, he just couldn't make a puppet that came close to her. And maybe Rena was the design of the marionette puppets that the rest of them are based off of. And if we believe that Celavis is the one that created Rena's puppet body, I think this would actually explain why he wanted Ronnie as a puppet, because when you are given the option to give Ronnie the Amber Drought, she immediately knows what it's for. She's creeped out by you. She knows who sent it. She knows what it does. So she probably already saw this drought in action once before regarding Rana. And in fact, her puppet body may be the same one.
And again, I think that theory goes a little bit too far for my liking, but I mean, with Celavis trying to get Nefeli Lu as a puppet, and Celavis being her vassal, and there being a literal storeroom of puppets, she may have turned a blind eye to some of what Celavis did, but then she knew he was going too far, and she like kind of gets rid of him even if you don't do that. So he may have tried to have gone through the plan on his own. It's just one of those annoying things for like FromSoft neither shows nor tells to give us like the full understanding of the circumstances here.
One that Renna used that was given to Ronnie when Ronnie killed herself. Renna may have given her puppet body to Ronnie with the request that Ronnie give the tarnished player her old spirit calling bell in the beginning of the game. I know there is a lot of assumption going on here, but I'm just trying to make a story out of the little information that we have. I personally think that Renna was Renala's sister and Ronnie's aunt, because there is a sad little jellyfish spirit at the Stargazer's ruins, and her name is Oriolette, and you can reunite her with her sister by using the jellyfish spirit ashes, and her name is Aurelia. And we learned that they died at 14 years old, and you can find their little gravestones behind the Stargazer's ruins that read, "Here lies Aurelia and Oriolette, who never saw the stars." So Renala and Renna, being named in the same fashion as Aurelia and Oriolette, were most likely sisters and possibly even twins. And if this is where Renala found her full moon, it could have also been where Renna decided to pursue cold sorceries, learning it from their neighbors, the Zamor. And the Zamor were sworn enemies of the fire giants, whereas the astrologers considered the fire giants their neighbors, and the prized treasure of the Kari Manor is the Sword of Night and Flame. So yeah, cold sorceries might have not been something that Renna wanted to practice openly. It might have not been something appropriate for Renala's sister, as head of the academy, as queen of the Kari Manor, for her sister to have been practicing. But this family tie is how Ronnie was introduced to the Dark Moon, a blend of lunar and cold sorcery taught to her by her mother and her aunt. While I was working on this video, I wanted to see if anyone else had made a connection between Renna and Renala being sisters, and I came across an amazingly well-written post on Reddit outlining this theory about who the three sisters that resided in the rises behind the Karya Manor were, and this person did such a good job of outlining their theory in text, so you'll have to go check that out for further reading. But their post brought up a theory that I hadn't heard.
It would have been nice if she like said the person by name rather than just saying this person, but it's all good. I appreciate them, or Kaiteo, citing her sources here.
Yet. And that is the theory that Selen is the third Karian sister. This theory hypothesizes that the rises originally belonged to the three Karya sisters, Renala, Renna, and Selen, and so Renala eventually gives her rise to Rani, and Celavis moves into Selen's rise after he helps her escape to safety when the Academy decides to expel her for her experiments in pursuing the primeval current. Rani is the last.
And I know that's a pretty popular theory that Selen is a Karian princess. I'm kind of against it because the Karian filigree makes it sound pretty definite that Rani is the last Karian princess. And so I think even if Selen is expelled, I just think it's a little bit of a, I don't want to say like a misreading, but a particularized reading of what it would mean for Selen to no longer be a princess. Anyway, so the filigreed crest says, an honor said to have been once awarded to Karya knights who served the direct retainers to the kingdom's princesses. Now there is only one princess, Rani, daughter of Renala. So, is Selen no longer a princess? Is this a political thing or a hereditary thing? I think it just becomes a bit too convenient to be a political thing rather than like a hereditary one. So that's kind of why I don't think Selin is a princess because of this item specifically. So if this item wasn't written this way, I would probably be a bit more on board with the theory. The tops of the ice pots look a little bit like Ronnie's doll flesh. Interesting.
Princess in the Carian line, and Renala is its first queen. But there are a couple different item descriptions that talk about the Carian princesses in plural. The Carian filigreed crest says that it was awarded to Carian knights who served as direct retainers to the kingdom's princesses. Now there is only one princess, Rani, daughter of Renala, and the discarded palace key states that it opened a treasure chest passed down to Carian princesses. And inside this chest, you find the Dark Moon Ring. But Renala only had 3 children, and only one of those was a girl. So the other Carian princesses must have been Renala's sisters or her nieces, the original inhabitants of the Three Sisters Rises at Caria Manor.
So that's an interesting idea, but I'm not entirely sure how that works, and this is just due to a little bit of my ignorance of the status of royalty, because I don't know if the cousins of the royal mainline are still called princes and princesses. That would be something I would need to look up in both English and Japanese, because I certainly don't know what the hell this stuff is like in English, let alone Japanese. And so yeah, aside from that, I would disagree that with Kitetail's premises here that we know Renala only had the 3 children. There could have been more that we don't know about. There's also the really weird and annoying implication that the juvenile scholars could sort of be Renala's children, and in some kind of way, because she kind of acts as a surrogate mother to them at least. There could have just also been other Carian children we don't know of, some who may have perished in the Night of the Black Knives or the Shattering Wars or things of that nature. There's also the possibility that Renala could have had children before Ratigan showed up onto the scene, which is going to be a very contentious claim because we really have no direct evidence for that. But as the favorite thing that I like to point to of FromSoft kind of just not so blatantly retconning things, but just shoving in new things that didn't exist in their prior games, I will, of course, point to Princess Filianor and her existence in the Ringed City in Dark Souls 3, when there's no foreshadowing or illusions set up in Dark Souls 1 or 2 for it. So, right. You're not too sure about this theory, if you can be honest. That's fine. Even if I disagree with this theory, it's I do enjoy thinking about it and, kind of refining my thoughts based off of it.
Freezing pot is described as being engraved with the crest of the Carian royals. It originates from the cold, dark moon of Rani, the Carian princess. And we can see here the seal of the Caria family on it, which is the same crest associated with all of the Carian sorceries. It's also the crest on Renala's and Rani's moon spells. But the ice crest shield, which you can find at Caria Manor, reads that the ice crest originates from a Carian princess. But this is not the crest of the Carian family. This is not the crest that Rani uses on her spells, on her freezing pot. This is just a simple snowflake, which makes me think that this iced crest shield, this symbol, belonged to the Carian princess, Rena. Another ice connect.
So that's a pretty interesting theory right there. Obviously, we don't have enough evidence to fully support it, but, that's fairly plausible. I can appreciate that. The crust on their spells. All right.
Connection that I discovered through this same Reddit post that I would not have found on my own is that the frozen needle sword, which is a piercing blade of ice, was forged by E.G., the Carian royal blacksmith. So it may be likely that E.G.
Yes, Eeg.
knew Rena was practicing cold sorceries and forged this blade for her. because this lines up with the frozen armament spell that was used by the Snow Witch. So we know for a fact that she did indeed use a sword. Another way that Ranni might have followed in her aunt's footsteps was by killing her fleshly body. Maybe she knew it'd be possible to get a new body because that's exactly what Rena had done. So back to the moonlight.
And again, that's just kind of based on an unsupported theory that the Snow Witch didn't have a body because of Ranni inhabiting the body of a doll, which I am not on board with.
Altar. There is an elevator here that reaches the depths of Ansel River, and in Rena's Rise there is also a portal to Ansel River. So this now links the Carian family to Ansel River and the corresponding eternal cities. And where is the elevator to Ansel River located here? Does this count as deep in the woods as described as the Snow Witch set? Possibly. It's definitely hidden in the trees. So now we have another theory. Could Rena have been a Nox sorceress? There are multiple links between the House of the Moon and the Eternal Cities. A very direct link is that there is a Nox swordstress statue in the Church of Vows, and E.G. wears a mirror helm, which is fashioned after the Nox mirror helm. And the Nox used to be guided by a lost black moon, so the connection to lunar worship is a passion that was shared by both the Nox and...
And I'd also love to point out that on the Black Moon of Noxtella talisman, we've got what appear to be two cuckoo adorning the top of it.
To lunar worship is a passion that was shared by both the Nox and the Carian royal family. And then there's this sword of night and flame. It wasn't called the sword of moon and fire, it was night and flame. So I think this could be another connection to the eternal night sky of the Nox. Although there is an undeniable connection here between the Carians and the Nox, I don't think that Rena being Nox is a strong enough theory. It certainly just doesn't have as much evidence as Rena being a part of the Carian family and being a Carian princess. So I think that is the theory that I am most content with. I think that Rena was probably Renalla's sister, and thus this explains Ranni's fondness for her and her willingness to adopt her cold sorceries, and also her taking on her appearance and even introducing herself to you as Rena in the beginning of the game. This wasn't just a mentor-student relationship. It seemed to be a little bit something more than that. I know this video had a lot of information.
Yeah, and I could see that. I'm a little bit surprised she said it a little bit so casually here. I could see that being a good basis for trying to say that the Snow Witch must have been Rena, because if Ranni is more or less assuming the form of the Snow Crone, then her introducing herself as Rena could be saying, I am the Snow Crone Rena, and then she like drops the act later on. So I think that could be a good foundation for that idea. So yeah, just a little bit surprised she didn't lean on that further.
It seemed to be a little bit something more than that. I know this video had a lot of information and there is a lot here to digest, so I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any thoughts on this subject, please feel free to add. I always love hearing what you guys think. So, who do you think the Snow Witch was? And tell me about it. I want to give a big special shout out to my beloved channel members. Thank you so much for supporting me. Doomsday Zen, James Flack, Twisted Bishop, Joey, Alexandra Jojo, Dantecoy, Francisco Mena, Crod, and Solomon. Thank you all so much, X's and O's. And if you'd like to support my channel, you can sign up on the membership section of my homepage. Now, who is going to be playing Lies of P? Because I just downloaded that, and as soon as this is...
I'm like, wait a minute. These doors look similar. Although they are different, at first I was like, wait a second, they remind me so much of the Fair Missoula doors, like the green ones. But anyway, they're different.
Uploaded and edited. I'm going to start that game and see if there's some interesting content I can share about that. So, yeah. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. everyone, it's Kai.
Damn it. So why do those videos always end so abruptly? Maybe I was muted when I talked earlier about the doors. Maybe I wasn't. So anyway, I thought the doors there for a second were the ones that you could see in Fair Missoula, but no, they're different. Alright. So that was the video by Kite Tales about the Snow Witch. I enjoyed it. There was definitely some parts that I disagreed with strongly, but then there were a lot of parts that I also enjoyed, and I think it was a very grounded video. I do appreciate Kite Tales being clear at times when she was making speculations, you know, for the sake of crafting a story. I can appreciate that. It is always a bit of a challenge to try to entertain an audience versus trying to, you know, remain more matter of fact. So obviously I like to stay on the side of the tracks that is a bit more matter of fact as best I can. And I'm sure others would disagree with me about that as well. So anyway, I enjoyed the video. I'm going to go ahead and share it with you guys in the chat if you want to give her a like, a sub, and or a follow. So, her asking about Lies of P is an interesting question. So, alright, I'm going to do something a little bit unprecedented for the channel and say that I'm going to stream a game for the first time, not blind, in Lies of P after I stream Alundra. So I'm waiting for some hardware to arrive to facilitate that whole process. And once I get that all set up, I will probably start doing that. Maybe not like the first or the second, but sometime like maybe like next week, I'll start streaming Alundra. I'm not sure if I want to like stream a little bit of reactions before playing Alundra or like just doing a fully devoted stream to Alundra at first, or if I did stream both at the time, doing like an hour's worth of streams, then like ending the stream and then starting a full-on Alundra stream, so that way you guys could watch like the type of content you want directly from the channel and not have to like either like skip an hour or, you know, skip the content that you're not interested in. So I'll need to think that through a little bit further. And then once I finish Alundra, I will go through Lies of P for you guys. And I figure that should probably get us into like the realm of February. And then once the new Final Fantasy game drops, I will also drop and kind of go off the grid for a bit to enjoy that. It's going to be hard to not backseat for Lies of P. Yeah, hopefully we will all, you know, enjoy it to the best of our abilities. All right. So I think this is a good stopping point for the night because the next two videos are definitely going to take us over time and all that stuff. So tomorrow, I guess we will watch Why Does Dark Souls Sound Like Dark Souls and potentially The Fate of the Forlorn. So I was holding off on watching a couple difficulty videos. So I'm thinking maybe we'll start off with Difficulty is Weird. And there's another one about difficulty. Oh yeah, the difficulty paradox. So I think I'll queue those two videos up and then maybe get into like the more lore stuff starting on tomorrow's stream at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You love 8-Bit Music Theory? I don't think I've watched anything by their channel, so that'd be good. They do great vids, gotta support a fellow Canadian. Alright. Well, alright everybody, thank you so much for dropping in and sharing your time with me, and thank you for all the well wishes for my dog's well-being. He is doing pretty okay so far. We're just waiting on the lab work. Hopefully everything is good and all that. I will keep you guys in the loop, and I really do appreciate you know, all the support. So once again, thank you so much. That'll be it for me for tonight. Hopefully we'll catch you on the next stream tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Till then, stay safe, take care. Last Protagonist out.